Chapter 344. Jilin's sword was not only faster than time, it could even stun time. That sword seemed to contain a unique sense of beauty that made people unable to help but watch carefully. That was a realm that humans could only reach after countless trials and tribulations in the way of the sword. Not only that, but it also required some talent. The tip of the dragon-scale sword did not touch the Emperor's sword, but it was still blocked. The power of 100 million humans was enough to stop Jilin. As long as there were enough people, they could cross the gap no matter how deep or far it was. However, the price might be a change in the wind and clouds, and the earth would shake. The power of the human emperor and the power of the Megalosaurus clashed. The weather became uncertain, and the earth began to shake and crack. The human army was a little confused. Even though they were usually good at fighting, they could not help but panic in the face of such a mythical battle. On the other hand, the emperors and legends standing in front of the army were very calm. They could even talk and laugh. Red Calamity's sword. Could it be the starting move of the legendary flowing light sword technique? Oh my, it's as fast as lightning. So powerful. The Fist Emperor's tone was very exaggerated. He was asking the obvious. Among the legends, he was the closest to the Sword Saint when his hands were still healthy. The two often exchanged pointers, so he was very familiar with the Sword Saint's sword techniques. Moreover, it was the Sword Saint's famous ultimate move. The Sword Saint used this move the most, because most people would not be able to make him use it twice. The Sword Saint lowered his head and did not speak, which was rare. Lord Sword Saint, don't lower your head. Say something. If this sword technique was used by a human, I might have to congratulate Lord Sword Saint for having a successor. At times like this, the Pope could not help but gloat. Red Calamity's talent in the way of the sword. The Sword Saint pondered for a moment. Although I don't want to say it, it is indeed better than mine. As soon as the Sword Saint said this, the atmosphere instantly became gloomy. The Sword Saint, Guy Mingyua, was a very proud person. Everyone present had heard him say, in terms of talent and swordsmanship, no one can surpass me in this world. This was an extremely arrogant sentence. But now that the Sword Saint had said so, just how powerful was the Red Disaster's swordsmanship? Would the human sovereign be able to handle it? Just as everyone was worried about the human emperor, the Red Disaster was the first to end this pure brute force confrontation. The Red Calamity had changed its attack. Full moon sword. Fluorescent light. Oblique wind. It was drizzling. Broken mountain. Sky piercer. Jilin's sword path became more and more varied. Sometimes it was dense and long, and sometimes it was as violent as a thunderbolt. It was like a storm hitting a reef on the sea. The golden shadows kept disappearing and reappearing. It was obvious that the third young master had expended a lot of energy. If it wasn't for the fact that he had the ability to travel 1,000 miles in a single step, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. In the crowd, the expressions of the various gods became very interesting. The Pope glanced at the Sword Saint. You said that his talent in swordsmanship is high, so it's inevitable that he secretly learned a few moves from the Red Disaster. But this isn't just 2 moves. This is already several sets of swordsmanship. Don't you think it's a bit too much to teach him? The Sword Saint coldly glanced at the Pope. His gaze was as sharp as a knife, and he simply spat out a word. Scram. In the end, the Pope wasn't an ordinary person. Facing the Sword Saint's sharp gaze, his face didn't show any fear. He still said, "You're too much. Even if you're helping an outsider, you can't do it like this. No matter what, the human sovereign is still your nephew. Look, they both use swords. Why is the Red Disaster's swordsmanship so sharp that it has reached perfection? Why hasn't the human sovereign come up with any decent swordsmanship?" The Pope was purely mocking. He already knew that the third prince couldn't learn swordsmanship when the third prince ascended to the throne, but this time, even the Sword Saint couldn't say anything. In front of so many people, for the first time in his life, he wanted to find a hole to hide in. The heavens were toying with him. Who would have thought that the Sword Saint's nephew couldn't learn a single set of swordsmanship? When teaching the third prince swordsmanship, the Sword Saint had more than once thought, is this guy really my nephew? Maybe Li Jing found him somewhere to trick me. I didn't think that the Sword Saint's nephew would be suppressed in swordsmanship. TSK TSK TSK. War King's face was full of worry. The Sword Saint finally couldn't help but tighten his grip on the hilt of his sword. No one else said anything. What's wrong? If you keep defending, you might die. Jilin brandished his greatsword with incomparable ferocity. The third prince looked at Jilin's godlike figure and thought, as expected of the red disaster. 100 million, 50 million. The third prince swung his sword. The mountains and rivers trembled, and the red disaster was sent flying. Jilin flew into the sky and stabilized himself with his wings. He looked down. Because of the thick clouds, the third prince and the human army could no longer be seen. Jilin could only see them with his golden eyes. Jilin looked at his scales that weren't broken but had some cracks. He felt a bit strange. He always heard humans say that one person can defeat 10 people, but he didn't think that there would be a day where the other person was one person and he was 10 people. Jilin slowly landed on the ground. How many people are there in the human race? Jilin asked. Childish. The third prince obviously wouldn't tell Jilin. It's not too late for you to admit defeat. Jilin was so angry that he laughed. Be careful, I won't be able to hold back anymore. Jilin's golden eyes suddenly became brighter. The signs of dragonization on his body became more and more serious. Fangs grew out of his mouth, his limbs became thicker, his nails became sharper, and a dragon tail grew out of his back. This was because Jilin used more of his dragon bloodline. Seeing Jilin's transformation, third young master secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. If he saw this scene 3 years ago, he would probably be so scared that he wouldn't be able to sleep for 3 or 4 days. Brother Long, although I can't learn swordsmanship, it's not like I don't know anything about the products of the human race's wisdom. The third prince said loudly, summon the human race's sacred weapons. Just as the third prince finished speaking, countless balls of light lit up in the human army. Armor, spears, sacred techniques of light. There were also all kinds of gems and treasures. The 3 nation weapons floated above the third prince's head. Countless treasures scattered around the third prince like stars in the sky. They faintly formed a mysterious pattern. A formation? Jilin tilted his head. That's right. The third prince raised both his hands. The treasures glowed brightly. Every treasure was connected by light, gradually forming a complicated pattern. It was a gigantic formation pattern. It was scattered all over the place. All the celestial phenomena in the sky appeared. The 4 divisions, 8 trigrams, yin and yang were all contained within. Not bad. Jilin's golden eyes reflected the entire formation. He could see the profoundness of the formation. What's its name? Myriad Phenomena Formation. The third prince shouted, Please advise me, Brother Long. Chapter 345. Following the third prince's shout, countless treasures floated up and rotated slowly like flowing stars, colorful and gorgeous. Jilin held his breath, his expression turning solemn. The third prince seemed to be standing on a commanding platform, surrounded by thousands of soldiers and horses, waiting for him to give the order to attack. The sky suddenly darkened. A moment ago, it was still daytime, but now it had turned into a resplendent night sky with twinkling stars. Under the Emperor's command, the stars appeared. Day and night reversed. Jilin frowned. Humans are really arrogant. They are clearly so weak, but they can tamper with the laws of heaven and earth to such an extent. Treacherous. Brother Long, humans always say that humans can conquer the heavens. Do you think it's just a saying? The third prince said, The reason why humans are stronger than other races is not because we are cruel and good at fighting, or because we have more people, but because we have the courage to fight against heaven and earth. When it rains and snows, we build houses to resist. When the roads are rugged, we build roads and bridges. When diseases are rampant, we find ways to treat them. Humans have always been fighting against heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are heartless and treat all things as dogs, but we have to take ourselves seriously. What treacherous! Ridiculous! How can we trample on the laws of heaven and earth when we are in heaven and earth? Humans are bound to be punished by heaven. Jilin's tone was awe-inspiring. Third young master nodded. I do believe that. Heaven and earth have never stopped testing the human race, but we still managed to survive. Until you appeared. Brother Long, you might be the heaven's wrath for the human race. I'm not. Jilin clenched the sword in his hand. But I don't mind doing this for heaven. Then come and experience it for yourself, the backbone of the human race. Then give up this job. The third prince raised the emperor's sword in his hand. Starfall. Brother Long, this is my full blow. If you can take it, I admit defeat. Crack. The sound of glass shattering resounded through heaven and earth. A few cracks appeared in the pitch-black night sky. It was extremely dazzling. Then, the night sky dotted with countless stars fell with a whistling sound. Although it hadn't really hit the ground yet, a deep crater with a diameter of tens of meters had already appeared where Jilin was standing. The sky fell, followed by countless stars. It was enough to crush the world. Jilin's eyes shone with a golden light. He instantly reverted to his true form. In the face of such an attack, he could not hold back at all. He needed his huge body to face the huge sky. Jilin took a step back and hid his sword behind his back. An incomparably tyrannical fist intent and sharp sword intent rose from Jilin's body. Sword Saint and the Fist Emperor looked at each other and saw the strange splendor in each other's eyes. Heaven-cleaving sword, the Fist Emperor asked. Lord Sword Saint really doesn't hide anything. The true meaning of the Tyrant Emperor's fist. Looks like Red Calamity has already obtained the Fist Emperor's true inheritance, Sword Saint calmly said. You two are still bickering at a time like this? If Red Calamity was a human, you two would have to give up your titles of Fist Emperor and Sword Saint. The Pope could no longer hold back. But to be able to fuse Fist Intent and Sword Intent into one. I'm afraid even you two can't do it, right? Of course they couldn't do it. This was not something a human could do. The Tyrant Emperor's fist's power was infused into his legs and wings as he suddenly moved. Boom! With a huge tremor, Jilin turned into a red arrow and shot toward the night sky. It wasn't that he didn't want to dodge, but he really couldn't. When the night sky descended, Jilin was already enveloped by the starry sky. If he wanted to break out of this situation, he could only slash the sky with his power. Coincidentally, there was such a sword technique. In the winter of that year, Sword Saint stood alone by a stream and looked around. He felt that he was invincible and lonely, so he created this sword technique that opposed the heavens. The power of the dragon race and divine power were all contained in this man's sword technique. With such a sword technique, it was easy to cut through mountains and seas. Perhaps only the heavens could withstand it. With a flash of sword light, the starry sky collapsed. Jilin was also drowned in starlight. The third prince spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. All the treasures on his body were shattered. The night sky dissipated, and the world returned to Ming and Qing. The third prince tried his best to raise his head and open his eyes to look at the starry sky. The starlight slowly dissipated, and Jilin hovered in the sky, holding his sword with one hand. Ha ha ha! Earth-shattering cheers sounded like a tide. Those were the cheers of the beast men and dwarves. Jilin won. Every human's face was covered with a layer of haze. Snatch the human emperor back. The Fist Emperor took a step forward. Activate! The Iron Blood King shouted. This time, there was no pause, because there were only 2 words. So no one knew what he was going to activate. However, the people of the Snow Wind Empire should be able to understand. Wait a moment. Sword Saint's sword light flashed and stopped the Fist Emperor. What do you mean? The Fist Emperor was shocked. Wait a moment. Sword Saint only repeated. Jilin slowly exhaled, and his golden eyes became a little dim. Others couldn't see it, but his whole body was trembling slightly. The dragon blood that flowed out had already turned into flames in the air, and the scattered scales turned into elemental light under his control and dissipated into the air. The injuries he suffered this time might be even more serious than the injuries he suffered in the cosmic array. This was his weakest moment, but it didn't matter. He had already won this battle. Even if he was in a weakened state, he was confident that he could kill all the remaining humans. Jilin's golden eyes swept across the human army as if he was looking at a pile of dead people. Suddenly, a speck of golden light appeared in Jilin's peripheral vision. It was as small as a golden star in the sky, but it was daytime now. Jilin was taken aback and turned to look. Boom! Jilin's body trembled, and a thick golden light pierced through Jilin's body. A gaping wound appeared on Jilin's body, penetrating from front to back. He had been pierced through. Jilin slowly turned to look, and a bottomless hole appeared in the ground behind him. It was really bottomless and filled with endless darkness. But Jilin could see through the darkness to the bottom of the hole. A golden arrow was stuck in there. Jilin had seen this before. It was the Elven Queen's arrow. Roar! With a dragon's roar, dragon blood splattered everywhere, and Jilin fell to the ground. The blood on the ground had already turned into a sea of fire. Jilin fell into the fire as if he was being cremated. The third prince saw what he wanted to see, and he closed his eyes in relief. The Elven Queen was really powerful. She could really hit him from such a long distance away. He had made the right bet. Brother Long must be cursing him for being despicable in his mind, but there was nothing he could do. Humans were so insignificant. If they wanted to fight against the heavens, they had to use some means, right? Even if they were unscrupulous, even if they were despicable and shameless. But in order to survive, so what? The instinct to survive was the same for all creatures and all races. Brother Long, don't you think so? Chapter 346. Elven Island. The Elven Queen stood on the shore, holding a huge bow in her hand. The bowstring was still vibrating. Drops of green blood dripped from the Elven Queen's white fingertips. Grass and trees grew wildly, and the entire Elven Island cheered. Behind her stood countless phantoms of gods. She had been preparing for this arrow for a long time. The third prince's biggest gain after coming to Elven Island was not learning how to use the human emperor's power, but the Elven Queen's promise of this arrow. The third prince's true trump card. Careful preparation. The enemy was in the open while she was in the dark, and Jilin was at his weakest right now. He had just defeated a powerful enemy and was careless. The arrow hit. The Elven Queen looked at the blood on her hand and remained silent. She had already broken the god's contract with this arrow. It would probably take some time for her to shoot another arrow out of Elven Island. Now, when the Sword Saint saw the red disaster fall to the ground, he immediately turned into a sword light and rushed forward. He wanted to pick up the third young master as soon as possible. There could not be any accidents. As for whether the red disaster was dead or not, there was no need to think about it. Even if it was not dead, there was nothing he could do. Moreover, he was not the only one who had started to move. Grab the Beast King! Sing roared loudly. He also took the lead and charged out. His silky mane stood on end. The human and red forces' armies began to move. There were many people on both sides, like sand in a desert. When such a huge crowd moved, the scene was spectacular. It was like a tsunami or an avalanche. It was more like two black seas were surging against each other, but just as the two sides were about to break out, everyone on both sides stopped in tacit agreement. They stopped at a very dangerous distance. Both sides were very restrained because it was obviously not the time to start a real war. The third prince and Jilin were both injured. The most important thing now was to bring the two back to their respective camps for treatment. The third prince was easy to deal with. The Sword Saint rushed forward at full speed, and his speed was frightening. He picked him up and returned to the human camp in the blink of an eye. But Jilin was not easy to deal with. Not to mention his huge body, The key was that there was a raging fire burning around him, making it impossible to get close. Sing could only lead people to surround Jilin and be on guard against the humans. The human army began to slowly retreat, like the ocean's ebb and flow. Countless bishops of the Church of Light rushed around the third prince. The third prince's body. Staya even took out the Holy Grimoire of Light. Based on this healer lineup alone, as long as the patient was still breathing, they should be able to heal him. Boom 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 boom, the ground suddenly, a violent trembling. A huge shadow covered the sky above the humans. Countless people looked up, thinking that a huge cloud had appeared in the sky. It was Wazit's Empire's city. The huge city was erected and turned into a human shape. It was really indomitable and towered into the clouds. Its feet were on the ground, and its chest was already above the clouds. Compared to it, even Jilin was as small as a speck of dust. This was the human's masterpiece, a combination of a fortress and a moving city. It attracted everyone's attention. "Your Majesty." Duke Lawrence ran out of nowhere and said while panting, "Iron Armor City has been activated." "I saw it." The Iron Blood King nodded. "Attack? If we let Iron Armor City attack now, we might be able to completely destroy the Red Disaster," Duke Lawrence said. The Iron Blood King did not say anything and was deep in thought. This was a crucial moment, and no one dared to act rashly. The Golden King was heavily injured, and the people were uneasy. "Your Majesty. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Duke Lawrence's eyes were red. He did not know why the Iron Blood King was hesitating. The Iron Blood King raised his hand. "Retreat first." "Your Majesty. Look." The Iron Blood King pointed to the west. Duke Lawrence was stunned and looked in the direction the Iron Blood King was pointing. The huge city standing in the depths of the volcano seemed to be shaking slightly, and 5 huge red cannons slowly rose from the ground. They were comparable to the city walls. Duke Lawrence's eyes slowly widened. It was the God-killing cannon. The ultimate weapon of the dwarves. It was said that there was only one in the Dwarf Kingdom. During the Battle of Snowfire, this thing only used one cannon to destroy a moving city of the Snow Wind Empire. And now, there were 5 of them. "Your Majesty, Iron Armor City is different from the 2 moving cities. It is more solid and powerful." Duke Lawrence was still unwilling to give up and wanted to try. Iron Armor City was indeed stronger than the 2 moving cities. Not only could it turn into a human shape, but it was also equipped with the Heart of Gold of the Middle Empire as an energy source and the runes of the Southern Xian Empire as reinforcement. Duke Lawrence felt that such a powerful weapon was worth a try. Even if there were 5 god-killing cannons on the other side. No pain, no gain. This was an eternal truth. If they could kill the Red Disaster, it would be worth it even if they lost 70 to 80% of their troops. "Don't panic." The Iron Blood King grabbed Duke Lawrence's collar and glared at him fiercely. "Retreat." Facing the Iron Blood King's fierce gaze, the Duke calmed down. He was indeed a little hot-blooded just now. He was not the supreme commander of this war. He was not, and neither was the Iron Blood King. This was a 4-nation alliance. While they were arguing, the other 3 nations had already begun to retreat. "Yes, Your Majesty." Duke Lawrence saluted and began to order the army to retreat. "How is the Beast King?" Sing anxiously shouted outside the flames. All of their lives were on Jilin's shoulders. If Jilin really died, it was uncertain whether the protection on them would lose its effect. If the protection failed, all the orcs and dwarves would instantly die in this volcano. Fortunately, His Majesty is still alive. Battel's voice came from the flames. Only he could step into Jilin's flames. Few sighs of relief could be heard all around. Fortunately. "How is the Beast King now?" "He fainted. But the wounds are healing quickly." "The wounds burned by the flames are healing. Is it possible to bring the Beast King back?" "Impossible." He moved. His Majesty moved. Jilin slowly opened his eyes, and the world was filled with loud cheers. Jilin only felt a cold wind pass through his chest. He looked down and saw a transparent hole in his chest. Despicable humans, the elf queen, Jilin forced the surrounding flames to his chest, then his vision turned black and he fainted again. This. Sing was stunned. Quick! Bring the Beast King back. Then the army will regroup and kill all those despicable humans. They have tarnished the word duel. Chapter 347. Jilin and the third prince were dragged back to the base camp by both sides. Seeing that the dispute had just ended, both sides withdrew their troops. However, after half a day of silence, there was another roar of ferocious beasts. The roar resounded through the world. The fully armed beastmen warriors were like landslides and tsunamis as they rolled out from the volcano. Their eyes were red, as if they were wild beasts that had been hungry for a few days. A piece of meat suddenly appeared in front of them and was snatched away. Other than risking their lives, they did not think of anything else. The orc army and the elemental creatures were so huge that they seemed to cover the sky and earth. In such a vast war, no matter how tall and strong the human fortress was, it was not enough. They could only fight with their lives and fight with the same huge numbers. The endless rain of swords, energy bombs, and flint in the sky became an eternal scene in the sky. The battle line was extremely long, and every small battlefield was extremely fierce. Every moment, there were all kinds of hair-raising screams and roars. The orcs shouted, "Kill these despicable humans and restore the glory of the orc race." The humans shouted, "Protect the country and fight for every inch of land. For the glory of the empire." The humans and the red forces fought fiercely. Blood flowed like a river, just like hell on earth. It was a pity that those who sacrificed the most for the country and the race often got the least. 3 days later. In a small human city behind the front line. Huicheng was the westernmost city of the Saimai Empire. In the past countless years, this city had an important role of guarding against the elemental creatures in the volcano. However, since elemental creatures rarely came out of Mount Gerda, Huicheng was basically a decoration. The place was remote and there were few soldiers. The Empire's attention rarely fell on this place. But now, this was the headquarters of the Four-Nation Coalition Army. The emperors and legends of the human race were all here. Countless messengers lined up to walk in and out of here. The map drawn in the war hall was covered with two-colored arrows. It was so densely packed that it made people dizzy at a glance. That represented the strength of both sides, like a dog's teeth intertwined with each other. The emperors and generals were all sitting in this room, looking at the map, but no one spoke. It seemed like no one wanted to issue an order. Because they all knew that at this moment, any further preparations would be in vain. Perhaps the sagely king wanted to give an order to one of the cavalry units, but when the messenger went over to take a look, it was possible that the entire cavalry unit was gone. There were too many people, and a battle like this would have been messed up long ago. The best way to describe a war was to change in an instant. Unless something big happened, no one would act rashly. The war king's finger moved back and forth on the map. That's about it. The fully armed beastmen are much more powerful, that's right. With the strength of our empire, it'll be difficult for us to resist them. Mu Xian sighed. After all, it is the combined power of the orcs and the dwarves. The warlord sighed. There's no problem in a frontal battle, but if the red dragon theocracy suddenly attacks us from behind, I wonder if the Middle Empire has a way to deal with it. Warlord, please be at ease. Qin Lan cupped her fists and said, "The red dragon theocracy will be guarded by His Majesty the retired Emperor and Grand Marshal East Suppressing Marshal. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. But the red dragon theocracy's Fu Lei, Lord Shadow One, is also by His Majesty's side." That's good. After a long journey of nearly a month, Bane finally passed through the vast wasteland and arrived at Fire City. Previously, he had thought that as long as he found the person, he would be able to find a mount, which would speed up his journey by 4 or 5 days. However, he did not expect that even if he found the person, he would not be able to find a mount. This was because all the livestock had been requisitioned by the army. He could only walk over step by step. the further west he went, the drier the weather became. Bane, who had lived in Gerda Volcano, was very familiar with this. However, what he was not familiar with was the thick smell of blood in the air. Bane had also been on the battlefield. He had done many ruthless things in the Divine Dragon Empire. Logically speaking, he was also used to seeing blood. However, the smell of blood near Fire City was so thick that it made Bane feel nauseous. Every breath he took was like drinking a mouthful of blood. Bane braced himself and walked into Fire City step by step. There were many soldiers here, but they only glanced at Bane in a hurry and ignored him. No, it should be said that they did not have time to care about him. The soldiers here had long stopped seeing humans as a potential threat. After fighting with countless orcs and elemental creatures, they only had one thought in their minds. As long as it's a human, it's one of us. Just like that, Bane moved east and west in the command center of the Four-Nation Alliance army as if there was no one there. On the contrary, he was very uneasy. When he was 10 kilometers away from here, Bane felt that something was wrong. When he was 10 kilometers away from here, Bane was sure that the two sides had already started fighting. When he was 2.5 kilometers away from here, Bane knew that the scale of this war was probably unprecedented and extremely tragic. And this war was caused by him. Although Fire City was not big, it was still a city. It was enough for an outsider to circle around and not find a way out. But fortunately, this was a city of the Saimai Empire. As long as it was a city of the Saimai Empire, there would definitely be a Church of Light in the center. If he wanted to find Staya here, the Church of Light was obviously the best choice. Bane lowered his head and walked towards the city center. Countless soldiers walked past him. His heart suddenly clenched in his chest. Phew. Bane sighed and continued to walk forward. It was not until Bane walked to the Church of Light that he met a guard for the first time. "Who is it? What do you want?" A soldier in the Middle Empire uniform asked. "I'm looking for the Saint of Light." Bane's tone was calm. "I wonder if the Saint of Light is here. If you're here, I'll have to trouble you to pass on the message." The soldier was stunned. The person in front of him was obviously not from the Middle Empire, but the way he spoke was very similar. "No, the Saint of Light is treating His Majesty right now. She can't leave for a moment. No matter who you are, I can't let you know." "The Golden King is injured?" Bane was shocked. "Who the hell are you?" The soldier raised his spear and pointed it at Bane. He looked a bit suspicious now. Who didn't know that Golden King was injured and unconscious within 100 miles? Bane didn't have time to explain. Suddenly, with a creak, the door of the church opened. A young woman in a white robe walked out. The soldier of the Middle Empire immediately put away his spear and nodded slightly to the woman. This was already very polite for these murderers who spent all their time on the battlefield. After all, the Church of Light was treating the Golden King. They couldn't neglect it. The saint said to let this person in, the woman in the white robe said softly. Chapter 348. Tap, tap, tap. In the brightly lit stone corridor, Bane followed closely behind the woman in the white robe. After passing through the long corridor, Bane came to a door. The woman in the white robe knocked on the door. "Saint, I have brought him here. Let him in." Staya's voice came from behind the door. "Yes." The woman in the white robe answered softly and pushed the door open. As the door opened, a white light overflowed from the room, as if there was a huge light source in the room. Bane narrowed his eyes and touched the long sword on his back. "Please come in." After his eyes adjusted to the light, Bane slowly walked into the room. The room was very simple, and the smell of candles filled the entire room. There was a bed in the middle of the room, surrounded by bishops from the Church of Light. Every one of them had a bright holy light in their hands. They were healing someone. Bane could tell at a glance. But, who was it? How badly was the person injured to make the Church of Light so concerned? Logically speaking, with so many bishops from the Church of Light here, even if the person was half dead, it would only be a small injury. These bishops could have a cup of tea together first, and then they would heal the person after the person breathed out the last breath. Plus, Staya was here, and the Holy Book of Light was here. What are you doing here? Staya walked out from the crowd and looked directly at Bane. We have been looking for you for a long time. I have something to give you. Bane took out the long sword on his back. Who is this person? Staya was silent for a moment. Liu. Liu? Bane was stunned. The third prince? Come out and tell me. Staya grabbed Bane's collar and dragged him forward. Bane was half lying on the ground, and was being dragged by Staya like a dead dog. Staya was shockingly strong, and could fight against level 8 magic beasts. Dragging Bane was not a problem for her. Staya dragged Bane all the way up to the rooftop. Staya threw Bane away and pointed to the west. Look. Ben turned his head to take a look, then immediately retracted his gaze. He already expected this tragic scene, and didn't want to see it. Jilin said you stole someone from him. For that person, Jilin started this war, Staya said in a low voice. Are you trying to say that it's all my fault? Ben looked at Tia. No, saving people is never wrong. Steve shook his head and said firmly, but I want to know, who is that person? Who is important to Jilin? Does it matter who that person is? Bane said, are you planning to find that person, give her to Jilin, and end this war? Staya, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I'm not you. I may never be able to figure out how to save thousands by killing one person. If that's the case, I can only follow my heart. If I want to save her, then I will save her. Staya was silent. After a long silence, Staya looked at the battlefield in the distance and said slowly, yes, it doesn't matter anymore. What would you do if it was you? Bane asked. As the princess of the Empire, I would hand that person over without hesitation, Staya said. Is that so? Bane lowered his head, and looked very lonely. The third prince was beaten by Jilin? Yes. The third prince lost the duel between the third prince and Jilin? He didn't lose, nor did he win. What do you mean? The third prince is half dead now, and Jilin is severely injured too. Jilin is severely injured? Bane suddenly looked up. How is that possible? Jilin has the dragon scale sword, and the third prince is no match for him. The human emperor is very strong too. But it's true that they weren't able to defeat Red Unicorn. It was the Elven Queen's arrow that severely injured Red Unicorn. The Elf Queen. Bane heard the name and was dazed for a moment. That creature with a perfect appearance but was even stronger than Jilin left a deep impression on him. Jilin was ambushed. Bane calculated in his mind, and it was easy to figure out the cause and effect. When Jilin was fighting with the Elf Queen, he was still holding onto ECI, and the distance between them was like face to face. In such a situation, Jilin was still able to dodge the Elf Queen's lightning-fast arrow. Now, the Elf Queen was thousands of miles away from Jilin, but she was able to hit him with one arrow. It could only mean that Jilin was ambushed. Jilin, will he die? Bane said. I don't think so, Staya said. Can the third prince be healed? Bane asked again. It's difficult, but he can. The injuries caused by Jilin are always difficult to heal, Staya said. I didn't notice it before. Because he rarely has injured people under his command. Bane smiled bitterly. Almost all the humans who fought with him are dead. The third prince is already very strong if he doesn't die. Did Aisha help you? Staya suddenly said. Although there was no beginning or end and it was somewhat abrupt, Bane clearly understood. You guessed it? Bane said. It's obvious, Staya said. Do you think you can save someone from Jilin by yourself? That's true, Bane admitted honestly. The third prince was able to go to the Elf Island because of Aisha's help, Staya said again. Suddenly, countless thoughts flashed through Bane's mind. He suddenly realized that Aisha was the one behind everything, the one who could see the big picture and even control the big picture. She even schemed against Jilin. She knew how to go to the Elf Island. When she was treating Staya's injuries, she was the one who suggested going to the Elf Island to treat Staya's injuries. After that, Aisha disappeared. Even Jilin couldn't find her. Bane shivered. He knew that Aisha was planning an earth-shattering scheme. Even the current war with so many people filling the land was just a transition in her plan. As for himself, he was probably just an insignificant chess piece. He couldn't see Aisha's plan clearly, just like how an ant couldn't see the huge castle in front of him. However, he only saw a small part of Aisha's darkness, and it was enough to make his hair stand on end. No wonder she was the legendary evil witch. She really lived up to her name. She didn't even do it herself, but the number of people she killed was already many times more than Jilin. What do you want to give me? Staya interrupted Bane's thoughts. Bane raised his head and saw Staya's sunny face. The haze in his heart was slightly dispelled. Bane was hesitant, but he gritted his teeth and finally gave the holy sword to Staya. No matter what Aisha wanted to do, Bane believed that Staya would always be the one who countered her. There was no harm in Staya being stronger. What is this? This is, boom. Bane was about to speak, but the earth suddenly shook and interrupted him. The earth began to shake violently, and a huge sound came from the west. Bane and Staya turned around. The biggest volcano of Mount Gerda was standing far away. The volcano shook, and what came out of the crater wasn't hot red lava, but a dazzling white light. A huge white light pillar shot into the sky from the crater. It lit up the entire world. Staya and Bane were very familiar with the position of the light pillar. Jilin's Red Dragon Palace was right under the volcano. This is. Bane looked at the white light pillar and felt it was very familiar. The mercy of the God of Light. Staya stared at the light pillar and said slowly. Chapter 349. The God of Light's mercy. Hearing Staya's words, Bane was completely stunned. He looked up at the sky. Where was the God of Light? When he lowered his head to look at the bloody battlefield that looked like hell on earth, how could he be merciful? What do you mean? If he didn't understand, he would ask. Bane was also a positive and enterprising young man. The God of Light's mercy is the pinnacle of healing spells in the Church of Light, the ultimate healing spell, Staya said slowly. It's a type of magic known as the divine art. Only the Saintess of Light could cast it. Why can only the Saintess use it? Because it's recorded in the Holy Book of Light, only the Saintess of Light can learn it, and it can't be taught. Then, that pillar of light is. Ben's tone was a little uncertain. That's right. Staya was very sure. It must be the God of Light's mercy. Bane blinked. That direction is Jilin? He used the spell? Staya nodded slowly. Isn't only the Saintess able to cast it? How did he learn it? Bane gulped. Did you teach him? Of course not. Staya shook her head, but her gaze was fixed on the white pillar of light. Jilin read the Holy Book of Light, he should know all the secret spells in it. Red Dragon Palace. Jilin's huge body lay on the stone platform. In order to put him back here, the Red Dragon Palace used a lot of effort. They even used the tools of the dwarf race. After putting him here, Singh turned around and led his people to fight the humans. Only Batel and a large number of elemental creatures were left, and they were heavily guarded. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Jilin slowly opened his eyes. An unprecedented sense of weakness rushed into his mind like a tide. Master. Batel's excited and surprised voice sounded. Jilin glanced at his chest and saw that the wound was still burning fiercely. The fire was the best medicine in the world for Jilin. The wound slowly healed. Batel, Jilin said. Master, I'm here. Tell all the elemental creatures in the Red Dragon Palace to hide. Yes. Jilin was always very satisfied with Batel. He had never listened to the nonsense of humans and had always obeyed Jilin's words unconditionally. Detestable the third prince, detestable elven queen, you have. Jilin clutched his chest as he slowly stood up. He crossed his hands and placed them on his chest, forming a simple hand seal. If Staya was here, she would definitely be shocked and might even want to fight Jilin to the death. This was because what Jilin was doing was a gesture from the Church of Light. It was the handprint used by the Church of Light to greet others and pray to the God of Light. It symbolized the light in the hearts of believers of light. It was peaceful, modest, and knowledgeable. Now that Jilin was doing it, it was filled with a strange sense of beauty. Ferocious and peaceful, evil and light, tyrannical and gentle. Many completely opposite feelings clashed and blended in Jilin's body. But perhaps in Staya's eyes, this was just blasphemy to the Church of Light. Jilin was also not used to this handprint. He tilted his head and thought about the content on a page of the Holy Book of Light. Humans always say that it's never a burden to have more skills. It does make sense. As Jilin finished speaking, a spot of holy light appeared in the gap between his crossed hands. Then, the purest and most authentic holy light filled the entire Red Dragon Palace and shot up into the sky, illuminating the world. If Jilin did not ask the elemental creatures to retreat in advance, this would have been enough to disperse most of the elemental creatures. Under such a large amount of holy light, the healing speed of Jilin's chest was more than doubled. Elven Island. The Elven Queen was beside the Spring of Life. She suddenly raised her head and looked towards the west. Her flawless face darkened a little. After a long while, the Elven Queen frowned and said in a low voice, "The shame of the dragon race." Woo! 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 The long sound of the horn was heard. The sound was long and spread far and wide. "What do you mean?" Bane asked. "Gathering the important humans to discuss important matters." Staya sighed. Jilin's actions are so big. Of course, he'll be noticed. Staya punched the city wall with all his might, causing cracks to appear all over it. Bane felt a little guilty and took a step back. "Well, I can't blame you. After all, he insisted on seeing it. You couldn't do anything about it. Besides, even if Jilin doesn't know how to heal, he might not die, right?" "I know." Staya sighed again. "But a Jilin who knows how to heal and a Jilin who doesn't, are worlds apart." "Yes." Bane nodded. Of course, he understood. No matter what race, a class that could heal themselves was always the most insane. If the Jilin before was a warrior who could fight and defend, then the Jilin now was a warrior with a bishop who specialized in healing. And a bishop who could use the ultimate healing magic. The humans want to kill Jilin. "I'm afraid it's already impossible." Staya sounded pained. "Do you really want to kill Jilin?" Bane looked at Staya and asked seriously. Staya paused. "I don't need to tell you how much Jilin is a threat to the human race. As the princess of the Empire, if there's a chance, it's my responsibility." "You want to do it yourself?" Bane froze. For the first time, Bane realized that determined could sometimes equate to cruel. No matter what, Jilin and Staya had been together for a long time. Plus, Jilin treated Staya quite well. "I'm the Saint of Light." Staya's voice became softer. "Then what do you really think?" Bane asked. "That's not important. If what you really think in your heart is not important, how can you say you've truly lived? I'm willing to give myself completely to the light and the people of the Saimai Empire. What if one day, the light wants you to betray your country and the people?" Staya glared at Bane and didn't say anything. Because this question was basically like, if your mother and I fell into the water, who would you save? Stupid and meaningless. It wasn't worth answering. Bane didn't care that he didn't get an answer. He was just arguing anyway. "Since the Saint of Light is so determined and you care about the world, please take a look at the thing in your hand." Bane looked at Staya. Staya pulled down the linen cloth in her hand. A blue-gold sword appeared in her hand. A sword. Staya froze. She had never held such a light sword before. It was as if it was nothing. But it felt so real in her hand. It felt so powerful and reliable. "This is If you want to kill the megalosaurus with your own hands, you need a holy sword. Bane was expressionless. Holy sword? Why is it with you? Its previous owner used it to challenge Jilin. Then he was beaten to death by Jilin. He asked me to bring the holy sword to you. Bane shrugged. He wanted to tell Staya not to be impulsive after getting the holy sword and think that she could defeat Jilin. Staya looked at the holy sword and felt that there was hope for humans. Chapter 350. Human Army Command Center. The leaders of the human race gathered in this room that was less than 100 square meters, all frowning. The atmosphere was so tense that no one could stay. Therefore, there was no one else in this room. If time went back 10 years and anyone in this room showed the same expression, at least 1,000 people would suffer. But now, there was nothing they could do. Bang! War King slammed the table. Everyone looked up and glanced at him. No one in this room was afraid of him. Your Highness, what's going on? War King looked at the Pope like a hawk. Why can the Red Disaster use the Church of Light's divine arts? Can the God of Light protect the Red Disaster? Humph. The Pope snorted coldly and did not say anything. The warlord was simply being unreasonable. What kind of divine art is this? The Xingning King asked. The Pope pondered for a moment. It should be the God of Light's mercy, should be? War King panicked. You're the Pope, and you don't even know the Church of Light's secret arts? There are many secret arts in the Church of Light. How can I know all of them? The Pope said confidently. You! War King was furious. Shut up, that's enough. Iron Blood King's tone was stiff. Iron Blood King is right. Sacred King said. The most important thing now is to find out what the Red Disaster is doing. Pope, tell us about the God of Light's mercy. What kind of effect does this legendary divine art have? The God of Light's mercy is the Church of Light's legendary healing technique. It's a true miracle. As for its effect, it's said to be able to heal all kinds of pain and illness in the world. Why is it only a rumor? Sword Saint said coldly. Because the God of Light's mercy is a divine art recorded in the Holy Bible of Light. Only the saintess can see it. Is that divine art really that powerful? Aren't you exaggerating? Musin said. The Pope shook his head. There are historical records of this in the Simai Empire. About 400 years ago, a new type of disease appeared in the Simai Empire. It was highly contagious and extremely difficult to cure. The epidemic spread like wildfire. At that time, the Simai Empire was unable to control it. In the end, the Saint of Light of that generation and all the bishops of the Church of Light worked together to display the mercy of the God of Light. In an instant, all the patients recovered to their original state. The diseases that afflict the earth vanish like snow in the sun under the illumination of the holy light. Following the Pope's statement, everyone present fell silent. They were all monarchs of a country, or they were responsible for the people of the world. They had all been troubled by plagues and other diseases. Therefore, they could understand how shocking the Pope's words were. The mercy of the God of Light was truly a godlike divine spell, but even so, the divine arts that could have saved all living beings had now been grasped by the calamity of mankind. To put it simply, the Red Disaster is healing itself, Musin said. How long will it take for him to fully recover? War King asked. I don't know. The Elven Queen's arrow and the Red Disaster are things that humans have never faced before. There's no way to deduce, the Pope said. The worst-case scenario is that the Red Disaster will fly out of Red Dragon City and spit fire above our heads, Sword Saint said. We need to take a gamble. Iron Blood King's eyes slowly swept across everyone. Are you saying that we should show all our cards now? Qinwan asked. The Red Disaster, serious injuries. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it's fleeting, Iron Blood King said. We'll stake it all on this. After a short silence, War King sighed deeply and said, Iron Blood King's words make sense. Everyone gently nodded their heads. But our people can't charge into Mount Gerda, Sacred King said. How can we kill the red disaster? We can, War King said. By we, he was obviously referring to all the high-level combatants of the human race. Although the legendaries are strong, there are too many beastmen. You'll be drowned by the beastmen army. You won't even be able to make a splash, Duke Lawrence said. We're not going to fight the beastmen army. We're just going to pass through, Sword Saint said. With these comrades beside him, he was confident that they could pass through the beastmen army and reach Red Dragon City. Red Dragon City is a city built by the dwarves. It's filled with traps and dangers, Duke Lawrence said. What's there to be afraid of? Sword Saint said angrily. There's no need for you to risk yourselves. Iron Blood King stood up. We've been preparing for this for many years, and now's the time. What do you mean? War King was stunned. He didn't understand. His Majesty means that the frontline battle will be left to us. Duke Lawrence smiled slightly. He looked like a strategist. Church of Light, Saint of Light? Princess? Staya? Bane called Staya loudly, but Staya seemed to be mesmerized by the holy sword and didn't hear him at all. Until, the ground started to shake. The ground started to shake. Even Bane couldn't stand still for a while. He swayed left and right, and finally managed to stand still by holding onto the wall. What's wrong? What happened? Bane yelled. Suddenly, a huge shadow covered Bane's head, and then quickly passed by. Bane raised his head abruptly, only to see an indomitable giant striding over his head. The shadow was just one of the giant's feet. The giant was so tall that it only took one step to cross over the Fire City. What's this? Bane yelled. The Snow Wind Empire's mobile city. You've seen it before, Staya said. I've seen the mobile city before, but how did it stand up? Bane pointed at the mobile city that was already far away. He felt like his worldview had been greatly impacted. Because human beings can improve. Staya suddenly said a very philosophical sentence, which made Bane stunned. But it was at this moment that Bane suddenly understood something. They want to take advantage of the situation? Bane widened his eyes and looked at Staya. Staya frowned and looked at Bane strangely. Her eyes seemed to say, why did you suddenly become so childish? If human beings want to kill Jilin, taking advantage of the situation is the only way. Staya said, if we can't kill Jilin before he fully recovers from his injury, I'm afraid that from now on, human beings will no longer have the ability to resist him. You? Bane choked. He felt as if there was a mass of air in his chest that he couldn't spit out or swallow. Do you really want to kill Jilin? For all the people in the world. Staya was always so righteous. All the people in the world. Bane looked up. I don't know them. But Jilin, he's our friend. Staya clenched the holy sword in her hand. You have betrayed him. Bane shook his head. I just don't want him to hurt Lysana. I don't want him to hurt anyone. But I don't want anyone to hurt him or even kill him. Stupid. As long as Jilin exists, he will hurt human beings. You and I know it very well. I don't care. Chapter 351. The holy light that erupted from the crater was like a bomb hanging in everyone's hearts, because they did not know when a red megalosaurus would fly out of the holy light. It would fly recklessly in the sky, slaughtering everyone. No one could bear the feeling of death approaching step by step, or rather, the feeling of scaring themselves. Under such pressure, the humans could no longer bear it and used all their trump cards. The mobile city that had been built for several years had completely given up its dignity as a city. It stood up from the ground, towering over the earth. It was no longer related to the functions and forms that a city should have. This was the ultimate weapon that the humans imagined to be used to destroy the Red Disaster in the era when the human emperor did not appear. It was indeed unstoppable. The distance of his steps was the size of a city, and the ground collapsed with each step. The humans have really made something amazing over the years. The Dwarf King put down the clairvoyance in his hand and sighed. The mobile city was too huge. Even standing on the Red Dragon City, they could see it clearly from such a distance with the naked eye. We can't let it rush into our camp. Sing's voice was a little anxious. That thing looked terrifying. Once it entered the Beastman army, every move it made would cause unbearable damage to the Beastmen. It would be normal for it to trample hundreds of orcs to death with a single step. Don't worry. The Dwarf King patted Sing's thigh. In terms of mechanical construction, the humans will never be better than us dwarves. Look at that thing and you can still boast so shamelessly. It just looks powerful. The Dwarf King's tone was very exaggerated, trying hard to express his contempt for the humans. Machines are not humans. It's so tall and so big, and we have to make it stand up. What a joke. Useless design. If you have any tricks, hurry up and use them. Don't worry. The Dwarf King's gaze was deep, and his eyes were full of disdain as he looked at the mobile city. Humans were so stupid. They always liked to do meaningless things and waste their energy, such as carving patterns on sword hilts and decorating armor with beast heads. They occupied a lot of resources for no reason, but they could not make good use of them. Because they were stupid. Look, this is the work of us dwarves. This is the true aesthetics of machines. The Dwarf King opened his arms and shouted loudly. This was not said to Sing, but to the whole world. It was also a challenge to the humans. Although the world could not hear it, neither could the humans. A few small hills suddenly rose from the surroundings of the Red Dragon City. They were made of steel with a cold luster. They were cannons, the most basic and simple cannons. Sing took a deep breath. He felt that these things were really in the style of the dwarves. They were simple and unadorned but very reliable. There were no surprises, only power. However, the ground nearby by the dwarves have been dug by the dwarves. Will it work? Sing was still a little worried. After all, the humans' weapons looked too ruthless. Don't worry, during the battle of snow and fire, we only need to use one cannon to destroy one. The Dwarf King waved his hand, indicating that he didn't care about that thing at all. Then how did you lose? But your country moved after the war. The Dwarf King rolled his eyes at Sing. Because we could only fire one shot. The God-slaying cannon uses magma as its energy source. The volcano before was too small. After all, it was a volcano in a snowy land. There was not much heat. What about now? Gerda volcano. From here to the west, there is no end. Seeing the moving city getting closer and closer, Sing was really panicking. Then what are you waiting for? Waiting for it to get closer. Mobilize the troops and let our people stay away from this thing, the Dwarf King shouted. Do I need you to tell me that? When this thing stood up, the troops were already shrinking. But there was not enough time. God-slaying cannon. Fire. As the Dwarf King waved his hand, the muzzle of a God-slaying cannon began to light up. Sing could clearly feel the surrounding air become hot. This was the depths of the volcano. The temperature was already extremely high. Moreover, he had the buff given by Jilin. Under such circumstances, he could still feel the temperature rising. One could imagine how high the temperature around him was now. Buzz the God-slaying cannon fired. The huge muzzle shot out a red arc of light, like a red comet streaking across the earth. The tail behind it did not dissipate for a long time. The sky was scorched. This was a God-slaying cannon. The God-slaying cannon was extremely fast. It was even as fast as light. When the red light appeared on this side, it had already hit the target. Boom! It hit the target in one shot. The moving city froze for a moment, and its entire body retreated a few meters. There was no suspense. There was no possibility of missing. The dwarf race was aiming at a target that was taller than a mountain. If it missed, the dwarf would probably commit suicide on the aiming seat. The Dwarf King raised his eyebrows at Sing proudly. He felt that the outcome was already decided. Dwarf King. Sing's hair stood on end. He turned to look at the Dwarf King. His eyes were as wide as copper bells. How? The Dwarf King was stunned. He looked at the moving city before he finished speaking. In an instant, the Dwarf King stopped breathing. It was as if he had lost the strength to breathe. His lips were slightly open. He did not blink. It was as if he had been struck by lightning. Impossible! The Dwarf King suddenly roared. Because other than the moving city being pushed back a little, it was not damaged at all. Impossible. Other than the dragon scale sword, there is no other material in the world that can resist the god-slaying cannon. No. Sing suddenly said. He pointed at the moving city and said, "Look carefully. There is something." Hearing this, the Dwarf King quickly took out his clairvoyance and looked at the moving city. There were specks of green light floating in front of the moving city. They were like fireflies dancing in front of people. Countless green light specks formed a huge green array in front of the moving city. It formed a barrier in front of the moving city. The thing that blocked the god-slaying cannon was that barrier. That was the perfect combination of the Middle Empire's array and the technology of the Snow Wind Empire. What is it? Sing asked. It is a person. The Dwarf King was a little uncertain. He focused his gaze. Slowly, the Dwarf King saw the thing in the green light specks. It is a humanoid machine. It is. Bright Snow Divine Weapon. Thousands of Bright Snow Divine Weapon. What? Sing had never heard of it before. God-slaying cannon, fire continuously. The Dwarf King shouted. Buzz, 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 5 god-slaying cannons fired continuously. Every shot was earth-shattering. Every shot had the power to pierce through mountains. Every shot hit the target accurately. The moving city squatted down and allowed the barrier formed by the Bright Snow Divine Weapon to completely protect itself. Red arcs of light streaked across the sky in a deadly trajectory. It was like a heavenly punishment. The moving city did not move. It raised the green shield to block every red light. It was as steady and thick as the earth. You said that humans are stupid earlier? Sing gritted his teeth and said, humans are indeed stupid. However, they have a strong learning ability. Dwarf King, since you have used this move before, then in the next war, humans will definitely have countermeasures. Dwarf King, you are looking down on humans. Chapter 352. Thousands of bright snow godly soldiers. Warlord looked at the light spots around the moving city and nodded. He gave Iron Blood King a thumbs up. Iron Blood King, you're indeed someone who does great things silently. Iron Blood King glanced at Warlord and said nothing. The atmosphere was a little awkward. What His Majesty means is that the human race was able to create so many bright snow godly soldiers because of the support of various countries. The Snow Wind Empire only did what we were supposed to do. We don't dare to claim the credit, so it's not worth mentioning, Duke Lawrence quickly said with cupped fists. Warlord blinked and was a little confused. He turned to look at Musin. Is that what he means? You can say that. Musin waved his hand and gave a perfunctory answer. He was discussing with Sword Saint about the specific route to attack the Red Disaster. He really did not have time to talk to his emperor. You haven't decided yet? Warlord frowned. Didn't you two go to Mount Gerda? But that was when we were young. Sword Saint sighed. They were the ones who chose the route because they had gone to the depths of the volcano to train when they were young. They were more familiar with the route. Moreover, the terrain has obviously changed. Musin also had a headache. He looked at the mountain-like Red Dragon City in the distance and the god-slaying cannons around it. He was at a loss. The dwarves had obviously dug out the area around Red Dragon City. The terrain of the roads was naturally different. It's all nonsense. Warlord slammed the table. Red Dragon City is so big. How can we get lost looking at it? Sword Saint and King of Fighters looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. Warlord had been invincible for too long. He had been called the strongest human for many years. He had long developed the habit of looking down on everything. Even the appearance of the Red Disaster couldn't change this habit of his. Red Dragon City was built by the dwarves. It's bound to be filled with traps. We can't force our way in, Duke Lawrence said. Iron Blood King nodded silently. That means, we need a spy who is very familiar with the routes inside Red Dragon City. King of Sacred thought for a while. The orcs won't help us, Singh said. The dwarves won't either, Duke Lawrence said. Elemental creatures do not have the ability to communicate with humans, the Pope replied. Dead? Sword Saint frowned. No. Duke Lawrence shook his head. The Middle Empire said that there is always a way out. There is someone familiar with Red Dragon City who can cooperate with us. After a moment of silence, the air suddenly became quiet. No one asked who it was. Because it was obvious that only the Saintess of the Light, Staya. No. Everyone turned their heads and looked at the person who spoke with a strange expression. This was not a surprising answer, but what was surprising was that the person who said this was not the wise king or the Pope, but the Sword Saint, Guy Manuel. A person who had nothing to do with the Saint of Light. The Saint of Light is currently treating His Majesty, the Golden King. The Golden King is severely injured. The Sacred Tome of Light is indispensable, the Sword Saint said. Then why don't we ask the Saintess to draw a map? Musin asked. A map is too risky. The Iron Blood King was halfway through his sentence, but when he saw everyone's expression, he sighed. Now, it seems, that is the only way. Then, who'll tell the Saintess? The Pope spread his hands, indicating that whoever wanted to go could go. The Saintess of the Light belongs to the Church of Light, after all. His Majesty the Pope should not decline this responsibility, Duke Lawrence quickly said. I'll go. Sword Saint finished speaking and turned to leave. Look at him. The Pope looked at Sword Saint's back and expressed his disdain to the others. At the Church of Light. Bane held onto the wall of the rooftop and looked at the moving city in the distance without blinking. An indescribable light flashed in his eyes. The light from the God-slaying cannon pierced through the sky and fell to the ground like a storm. The moving city was like a pillar that would not fall for 10,000 years, standing in a storm like a mountain. Amazing. Bane was so shocked that he could not speak. Yes, the 5 empires have never worked together before. Of course, the products produced are also unprecedented. Staya's eyes were cold. She did not seem to be as impressed as Bane by the human's great masterpiece. Yes. I have to say, Jilin's appearance has helped the human race improve greatly. Without Jilin, the 5 empires would not have been able to unite. No, now there are only the 4 empires left. Bane did not notice at all and continued to talk to the moving city. Back in the Snow Wind Empire, one shot could have destroyed it, but now it is unharmed after taking so many shots. How fast it is improving. Staya sneered. The God-slaying cannon is the most powerful weapon of the dwarves. There is nothing in the world that can take a shot from it and be unharmed. Even Qilin couldn't do it. It looks fine on the surface, but that doesn't mean it is. Bane was stunned. What's wrong with it? Every time it takes a shot, the bright snow godly weapon will consume a huge amount of resources. And those resources should be used in other places. Staya said in a deep voice. Bane slowly retracted his finger. This time, he understood. Staya's cynicism came up again. Then where do you think those resources should be used? Disaster relief, road building, bridge building, flood control, printing the Holy Book of Light. Staya said it so decisively, as if she did not even think about it, or as if she had already thought about it thousands of times in her head. If these are the common resources of the 5 empires, the first 4 are fine, but the last one is a bit inappropriate, right? What's inappropriate about it? Staya opened her eyes wide, which was rare for her. From her perspective, everyone in the world should believe in the God of Light. The reason why there were still people who did not believe in it was because the Holy Book of Light was too small. There are already enough Holy Books of Light. Bane face-bombed. I'm an orphan. I have no parents. I have nothing but walls, but I have a few Holy Books of Light. Why? Don't you give everyone one? Staya was also stunned. The villagers gave them to me. That's not important. Bane was going crazy. What I want to say is that developing weapons is also important. Humans need to have the power to protect themselves. No. Staya said slowly, people just need a sense of security. Many enemies and threats often only existed in people's imaginations. In order to deal with the enemies they created, they would endlessly develop weapons or cultivate in order to gain power. But power is endless and destructive. It will get stronger and stronger until it is out of humans' control and beyond what humans can handle. Just like the moving city. Bane, let me ask you. If the moving city is controlled by evil people, how do we defend against them? What do you mean? Bane was stunned. What I mean is, if humans continue to develop like this, humans will eventually be destroyed by their own power. Staya's eyes were burning. In Bane's eyes, she was like a lunatic. But things are already like this. What do you want to do? Bane knew that he could not beat Staya, so he could only go along with what she said. Now that the whole world is under the threat of Jilin, humans need to protect themselves. This is the only way. Staya thought for a moment, then looked up at Bane. Her eyes flashed with a light that made Bane's heart palpitate. So, I have an idea. Please tell me. Let's kill Jilin. Chapter 353. Let's kill Jilin. Hearing Staya's words, Bane almost choked himself to death by inhaling a breath of cold air. What did you say? Bane couldn't believe his ears. I said, that's enough. Bane quickly waved his hand to stop Staya. He didn't want to hear that sentence a second time. Are you crazy? Although you do look a little crazy now, you don't have to do this, right? You and I, kill Jilin? If he's so easy to kill, do you think you and I would have a chance? Are you sure you don't want to kill yourself with me? When did I offend you? Bane spoke very quickly. His questions were like a string of cannons, and he didn't stop. Staya had too many things to say, so Bane didn't know where to start. It was like you were comforting a soldier who was punished by the Grand Marshal. You tried to comfort him, but in the end, he really couldn't take it lying down. He gritted his teeth and stomped his feet, saying to you through gritted teeth, let's kill the Grand Marshal. Don't even let a single one of his tens of thousands of soldiers go. What else could you do other than chuckle? Moreover, Staya's suggestion was much more ridiculous than that. Bane looked at Staya. For the first time, he had a new understanding of Staya. Was she a hot-blooded girl who was extremely angry? Was the reason of for the sake of the people really that good? Bane never thought so. Back when he was in the Red Dragon sect, although there was a righteous gimmick like for the sake of the people of the Divine Dragon Empire, he would still be furious when he saw the Divine Dragon Empire's army oppressing the good people. However, Bane never thought of truly devoting himself to this great cause. Even at the most emotional moment, Bane would always remember that he was here to find clues about the Elf Island. What are you panicking for? Staya yelled. She was a young girl, and she was very majestic. You're going to take me to kill Jilin. How can I not panic? Bane retorted. Do you think you can defeat Jilin just because you have the holy sword? Why don't you return the sacred sword to me first? Quiet. Staya pressed on Bane's shoulder, and a warm holy light flowed from Staya's hand into Bane's blood. Bane felt as if he was bathing in the bright sunshine. Gradually, Bane calmed down. Phew. Bane let out a long breath and closed his eyes to calm himself down. After a few seconds, Bane opened his eyes. His gaze became firm and deep. What do you mean? Staya nodded in satisfaction. She thought that Jilin was indeed blessed by the heavens. He picked up a random person from a small mountain village, and his mind was so firm. It was really good. My idea is that we go find Jilin and persuade him to cooperate with us to put on a show. What show? Continue. Fake death. Who? Jilin. You mean, let Jilin pretend to be killed by us in front of tens of thousands of soldiers, and then we disappear from the world? Then the world will be peaceful and there will be no more red disaster? Yes. 2 questions. Bane raised 2 fingers. Speak. Who would believe that we can kill Jilin? We can't even scratch his scales, and his blood can make us disappear from the world. An ant tripping an elephant, and the elephant tripped? Even people above the age of 12 wouldn't believe that. That's right. But we have the holy sword in our hands now. This thing is enough to make people believe that we have the ability to kill Jilin. Okay. Bane didn't argue. Second question. Can Jilin cooperate with us to put on a show? Why would he? He's trying his best to heal himself. He's waiting to kill everyone when he's healed. I said, persuade him with emotion and persuade him with reason. Staya raised her head. Your Highness, can we not be vague about the key part of the plan? There are only 2 people in your plan. Why are you guarding against me? Don't tell me you still haven't thought of how to persuade Jilin. Don't say that you believe that you can persuade him. I don't believe in the theory that everything is possible if you have a firm belief. Bane narrowed his eyes and looked at Staya. His face was full of caution. Although that was the case, Bane was well aware of how bewitching the combination of Stee's righteous rogue theory and her personal charisma was. If Staya really went all out, Bane felt that he might not be able to stay firm. Bane, do you really think that Jilin wants to kill humans? Staya said seriously. Bane frowned. He thought that Staya was trying to deceive herself. Was there a need to ask this question? Jilin was so proud. Now that he was plotted against and suffered such a huge setback, he would definitely want to take revenge. He would definitely kill every human he saw. I don't think so. Staya shook her head. It seemed like she wanted to start a long story. Not a hammer. Bane raised his hand and wanted to interrupt Staya's baseless optimistic declaration. Then, he heard a voice behind Staya. Why are you here? Bane was stunned. He thought that the voice sounded so familiar. Bane looked behind Staya. When he saw the person, Bane quickly stood up and bowed respectfully. Master Sword Saint. Staya suddenly turned around. She thought that it was no wonder that she didn't notice when someone walked behind her. It was the Sword Saint, the Guy Mingyue. When I first met you in the Middle Empire's palace, I already felt that you were extraordinary. Now, it seems that I'm really good at judging people. The Sword Saint looked at Bane. His eyes flashed with an unfathomable light. This. Master Sword Saint, you're too kind. No, it's not too kind. The Sword Saint chuckled. Little friend, although your realm isn't too high, you were able to deal with the red disaster and endure humiliation. With just your body, you were able to stir up the momentum of the world and stir up such a shocking storm. You're so young, but you're really a hero. You really make me feel ashamed. Bane looked at the Sword Saint and suddenly fell silent. Every word of the Sword Saint was a compliment to him, and he was even more amiable to him. He was extremely humble. If it was someone else who said that to Bane, Bane would be very happy. However, if the Sword Saint, who was always arrogant, praised him so humbly, Bane would only think that the Sword Saint was scolding him with a smile. Master Sword Saint. You also think that I'm the reason why so many lives were lost in this war? You also think that I shouldn't have saved Lisana, Master Sword Saint? You also think that I should have sacrificed a weak woman to save the lives of tens of thousands? Bane had only been testing the waters at first, but in the end, his words were loud and clear. Don't you think so too? The Sword Saint looked at Bane. His eyes were as sharp as the edge of a sword, easily piercing into Bane's heart. Yes, Bane naturally knew that sacrificing one to save tens of thousands was the right thing to do. How could he not know? If he really didn't know, he wouldn't be so conflicted. The Sword Saint's words weren't the slightest bit inferior to his swordsmanship. They were both accurate and ruthless. He immediately saw through Bane's weak point and stabbed out with his sword without missing a beat. After being exposed, Bane was like a deflated balloon, and he immediately withered. This old man thinks that you're not wrong. The Sword Saint patted Bane's shoulder. Helping those in distress and saving weak girls from suffering should be the actions of a chivalrous man of the Jianghu. What's wrong with that? Young hero, why are you being so overcautious and indecisive? You're ruining the heroic spirit of a young man. Chapter 354. I lost. Bane looked at Sword Saint's demeanor and felt that he had lost. Look at how confident he was. A real man should be like this. If you think you're right, you should do it without hesitation. It doesn't matter if it's turning the world upside down or destroying it. After being enlightened by Sword Saint, Bane suddenly felt enlightened. To the people who sacrificed themselves in this war, or even to the whole world, he was a sinner for saving Lysana. But to Bane himself, if he didn't save Lysana, he wasn't even human. At least he wasn't a man. If that was the case, then there was no need to dwell on it. Thank you, Sword Saint, for your advice. Bane bowed. Sword Saint smiled while stroking his beard. His eyes were unspeakably profound. He looked like an expert. Staya frowned as she listened behind them. What kind of logic was this? Bringing chaos to the world for one person, and then saying it so righteously, was this the so-called Jianghu chivalrous warrior of the Middle Empire? No wonder the previous Golden King would always frown when the word Jianghu was mentioned. Until Sword Saint came into the world and calmed the storm with his sword, things didn't get better. Sword Saint, may I know why Sword Saint is here? Staya asked. Nothing. Sword Saint smiled. I'm just here to see my nephew. Oh, today the Golden King was severely injured for the sake of the world. The Church of Light will do our best to help. I hope Sir Sword Saint can rest assured. Staya said solemnly. No matter which country or era it was, doctors were always very respectful to their patients' families. The Saint of Light has the sacred Book of Light. In terms of healing, she's the best in the world. I'm not worried. Sword Saint paused. I was just casually looking around. I didn't expect to meet my young friend here and have a good chat. My young friend, shall we go somewhere else? Well, Bane was stunned at first, and then he realized that something was wrong. Lord Sword Saint, what kind of status does he have in the human race? Now that the two armies were at war, how busy would he be? It was reasonable for him to visit the third prince. What's with this conversation? All right. Bane was silent for a while before he bowed and replied. Even if there was something fishy going on, Bane could not reject the Sword Saint's invitation. He was indebted to Zhang Xian for imparting his swordsmanship to him. No matter how difficult it was, he had to do it. Moreover, Bane also wanted to end the conversation with Staya so that she could calm down. He would probably let go of the idea of letting Jilin fake his death after calming down for a while. Bane, think about what I told you. If you succeed, it will be a great achievement, Staya suddenly said. Yes. Bane nodded and left with Sword Saint. When Staya said that it would be a great achievement, he agreed. After all, it could save countless people, and he could even be remembered as a hero in the end. But Bane did not have the slightest desire to complete this great achievement. This was because Staya had forgotten that any unparalleled achievement would be extremely difficult. Only when something that was originally impossible to succeed was completed by someone through countless coincidences, would it shock the world and be remembered for generations to come. The probability was only 1 in 10,000. One wrong step, and he would be doomed eternally. It was an understatement to say that he was walking on a tightrope. Bane admitted that he did not have the luck of someone blessed by the heavens. On the bustling streets, there were soldiers running here and there with blood on their bodies. There were no more civilians in the city. Every house was emptied and turned into a place for the injured. Although the main battlefield was the battle between the god-killing cannons and the moving city. But there were still countless casualties among the normal human soldiers. Bane looked at the soldiers running back and forth on the streets. He did not know why Sword Saint chose this path. Although this path was the widest, it was also the most crowded. "Lord Sword Saint, where are we going?" Bane asked. "Young friend, looking at the scene around you, does your heart ache?" Sword Saint stopped and said slowly. Bane narrowed his eyes. "Lord Sword Saint, what do you mean by that?" "Young friend, I am not blaming you. I also believe from the bottom of my heart that the beginning of this war was not your fault." Sword Saint knew that Bane had misunderstood. But so many people were separated from their families and were beheaded. Our human race suffered such a calamity because someone made a mistake. Who do you think it was? Bane was silent. He knew who Sword Saint was talking about, but he did not want to say it. It's the Red Calamity. The culprit behind all of this is the Red Calamity. When the third prince ascended the throne, Jilin contributed. Sword Saint suddenly turned around. His eyes were as sharp as swords as he stared at Bane. "Are you still so stubborn?" At the time, the Red Calamity did not try to destroy our human race like it is now. Bane was silent for a long time. He looked around. Everywhere he looked, he saw the tragedy of the human race. After a while, Bane looked at the Sword Saint. "Lord Sword Saint, what is the matter? I hope you can tell me clearly." "The Red Calamity is a great calamity of the human race. As long as we are human, we should get rid of it as soon as possible. Now that the Red Calamity is injured, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We want to go to the dragon's nest and get rid of this calamity. We just need someone to lead the way." "You want me to lead the way for you?" Bane looked calm on the surface, but his heart exploded like thunder. Why are all these people like this? They all want to kill Jilin, and they all want to bring me along. Little friend, to be able to save someone from the tiger's den, you must be very familiar with Red Dragon City. Lord Sword Saint, what makes you think you can kill Jilin? Sword Saint paused. Bright snow divine weapons. We will bring hundreds of bright snow divine weapons with us for this operation. What if we can't kill Jilin? What if Jilin is almost recovered by the time we get there? The third prince is not here. This is too risky. Now is the Red Calamity's weakest time. If we can't kill him now, there will be no chance in the future. No. I need to think. What is there to think about? Look at these soldiers, they don't need to be like this. Don't you feel heartache? What are you hesitating for? I'm afraid of death, okay? Bane looked up at Sword Saint, his face full of fatigue. Sword Saint looked at Bane in a daze, then finally took a deep breath. Swoosh! A gleaming sword flashed, and a sharp sword steadily hung in front of Bane's throat. Bane's reason was too strong, Sword Saint had no reason to refute it. Everyone was afraid of death, and everyone should be afraid of death. Those who ran fast could mock those who ran slow, those who read more could mock those who read less, and those who had money could mock those who had no money. However, those who were not afraid of death could not mock those who were afraid of death. Because it was normal to be afraid of death, and most people understood it. Thus, Sword Saint could only do this. Of course it's okay to be afraid of death, everyone is afraid of death. Sword Saint said slowly, but you don't have time to think. Lord Sword Saint, is this your way of the sword? I have no choice, please forgive me. Chapter 355. Bane looked at the Sword Saint, who had a complicated expression on his face, and remained silent for a long time. He knew that the Sword Saint didn't want to kill him, and the Sword Saint didn't even need to draw his sword to kill him. The Sword Saint only drew his sword to show his attitude. He had no way to resist. Under the Sword Saint's sword, he couldn't run away, and he couldn't die. Master Sword Saint, I just think that this will make you feel better. Are you telling yourself because you have no other choice? Bane sneered. Every man and woman in Jianghu knows this saying, you have no choice in Jianghu. Excuses. Bane took a step forward. The Sword Saint's sword moved back, but it was still 3 inches away from his throat. You're the great Sword Saint, what do you mean by no choice? The Sword Saint sighed, what I'm doing now is. I don't want to force you. Then I'll have to trouble you, Sword Saint, to put your sword away. Bane said. I can't. Bane looked up at the sky, blinked, and calmed himself down. You can't succeed, you can't kill Jilin. Even if you can kill Jilin, after you succeed, you won't be able to come out. This is our only chance, no matter what, we have to try. Otherwise, how can we be satisfied? Bane closed his eyes and nodded, he felt that he had nothing to say. Bane felt that people like the Sword Saint and Staya were the kind of people who could accomplish great feats, people who could leave a mark in the history of mankind. These people, they must have a strong will, and they would sacrifice themselves for the sake of the world. Or to put it another way, these people wouldn't listen to others, and weren't afraid of death. Bane knew that he couldn't change the mind of the Sword Saint. However, he did not want to lead a group of people to ambush Jilin. If the Sword Saint had taught Bane swordsmanship, then Jilin had saved Bane's life. It was easy to weigh which was more important. If Bane cared about the country and the people of the world, he wouldn't have gone to Lisana in the first place. Lord Sword Saint, if you want me to lead the way, I'm afraid you'd better think twice about it, Bane said seriously to Sword Saint after thinking for a moment. Why? Because maybe I will lead you into the nest of the elemental creatures. You also know that for someone like you, although that thing can't be considered strong and brainless, it's better in one word. Sword Saint was silent for a moment. He didn't expect Bane to be so resolute on this matter. Is the red disaster worth you standing against your own race? Lord Sword Saint, Jilin is an important friend of mine. Bane said seriously, but since Lord Sword Saint has spoken, I will naturally give you face. As for finding Jilin, compared to sneaking through Red Dragon City, there is a more convenient and direct path in front of you. What? Sword Saint was stunned. Look, Bane pointed to the sky in the west, isn't that the most obvious path? Sword Saint said as he turned to look in the direction Bane pointed, thinking that it was indeed very obvious. It was a white pillar of light that reached the sky. It couldn't be more obvious between heaven and earth. Follow that pillar of light and fall straight down from the mouth of the volcano, and you will reach the bottom of Red Dragon City, the Red Dragon Palace. There is only Jilin and mountains of gold and treasures there. That volcano. Sword Saint frowned as he looked. That's right, we always thought that the red disaster would be hiding in the deepest part of Red Dragon City's labyrinth, but we didn't expect it to be in the most obvious place. Jilin never hides from anyone. Bane looked at Sword Saint and said, in my opinion, the most important thing that Jilin learned in the human empire is not to judge people by their beastly nature. And for us humans, if we want to understand Jilin, we should also learn not to judge beasts by their human nature. Dragons can learn how humans think, but humans can never learn to be beasts. Sword Saint said. Bane sneered, how do you know that you can't do it without trying? The reason humans don't want to try is because they think they are better than beasts. But sometimes, calling humans beasts in human clothing is also an insult to beasts. My young friend, your words are a little inappropriate. How is it inappropriate? Jilin once said that in his eyes, beasts and beasts are not much different from humans. Only humans don't think so. Bane shrugged. Nonsense. Sword Saint snorted, put away his sword and left. How many years has it been since someone dared to speak to him like that? Bane looked at Sword Saint's back as he left and let out a long sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and found that his palms were also sweaty, and his forehead was even more damp. Bane thought to himself, Sir Sword Saint's sword intent is indeed oppressive. Talking to him always makes one feel like there's a blade at one's back. This time, in order to provoke Sword Saint, I've spoken so harshly. I've really put in a lot of effort. Bane calmed himself down and quickly ran towards the Church of Light. In the turbulent crowd, Bane dodged left and right. His figure was ethereal, and his speed was extremely fast. He was like a shadow hidden in the crowd, and also like a fish moving nimbly in the reefs under the sea. Bane was now a level 6 metahuman, so he could run very fast. It didn't take long for him to find Staya again in the Church of Light. In order to save time, Bane went through the window this time. "Staya, I think your plan is great. Let's go." Bane grabbed Staya's wrist and dragged her out. Staya frowned, turned her wrist and grabbed Bane's wrist. "I can't leave now. To save the third prince, the Canon of Light is essential. I can only move around within the church." "What's wrong with you?" "Ah. Let go." "I won't let go." Bane didn't dare to struggle, and could only say quickly, "Do you know why Sword Saint took me away just now? They want to kill Jilin." "Kill Jilin?" Staya frowned. "How?" "Sword Saint said to bring a few hundred bright snow mystical soldiers." Bane said. "I understand." Staya pondered for a moment, and immediately understood. She could roughly guess the plan of the humans. It was nothing more than a few legends breaking through the enemy's formation and delivering a few hundred bright snow mystical soldiers to Jilin without any damage. Then the bright snow mystical soldiers would kill Jilin. For this, they had to conserve their strength. In short, they had to know the right path. This path had to have the least number of enemies, and it had to be extremely hidden. There were only 3 people in the human race who knew about this path: Bane, Aisha, and herself. Therefore, Sword Saint actually came to find her. He just happened to meet Bane, and felt that Bane was more suitable to lead the way, so he took Bane with him. Thinking about this, Staya suddenly froze. She looked at Bane and asked, "You told Sword Saint about the secret path?" There was a secret path in Red Dragon City. The 3 of them knew about it. It was the only loophole left by the bad habits of the dwarves in Red Dragon City. It was a secret door on the city wall. "No." Bane shook his head slowly. "You didn't say that he would let you come back?" Staya obviously didn't believe him. "Because I told him about another path." "Which path?" Stilla was taken aback. Looking at Bane's unconcealable smirk, a bad premonition quietly emerged in Stilla's mind. "The path that's the easiest to recognize, but also the one that you can't take." Chapter 356. Jilin sat cross-legged and bathed in the holy light that reached the sky. The holy light washed back and forth in his body. That was the unparalleled holy power of light. It was a power that could heal everything. Jilin, on the other hand, was enveloped by this power for 3 days. Many of the injuries in his body had already healed. Only the wound on his chest was healing very slowly. Around the wound, one could clearly see a layer of hazy green light that did not dissipate. Although it was small in the dazzling holy light, it could still be seen clearly. That was the power of the Elven Queen. It was not so easy to heal. Around Jilin, the Red Dragon Palace, which no one was willing to come to, was now bustling with people and carriages. Huge carriages driven by dwarves and carrying a large number of injured orc soldiers lined up and walked into the Red Dragon Palace. They made a big circle in the Red Dragon Palace before walking out. During this time, they left behind a ground full of injured soldiers. These orcs were either covered in blood and on the verge of death or missing an arm or leg. Simply put, none of the injured soldiers who came to the Red Dragon Palace walked on their own. But the amazing thing was that these orcs could walk out on their own after a short while. Every one of them was in high spirits and had all 4 limbs. The miraculous scene of life and death, flesh and bones, appeared before Sing's eyes. Naturally, it had a great impact on him. Sing had never been so proud of himself for passing the throne of the Beast King to Jilin. Looking at the orc soldiers who kept walking out from his side, Sing was so excited that his body trembled. He wanted to kowtow to Jilin from the bottom of his heart. "What's the situation on the battlefield now?" Jilin's voice came from the holy light. Sing was shocked. "Beast King, the humans have deployed a huge weapon with unparalleled power." The Dwarf King has used 5 god-slaying cannons to barely contend with it. Jilin was silent for a while after hearing Sing's words. The humans are improving really fast. 5 god-slaying cannons and they're still at a disadvantage. Beast King, please rest assured and recuperate. The situation is still under control, Sing said with his head lowered. How far have you advanced to? Jilin asked. What's wrong? Cough, cough. Sing coughed guiltily. Because the Beast King's current situation is not stable, the Dwarf King and I have unanimously decided to shrink the battle line and fight steadily. So, the current battle line is, at the border of the volcano. Jilin fell silent. Perhaps 2 years ago, he would have been fooled by Sing's words. But now, he was no longer the same as before. What Sing meant was that the Red forces had been beaten back by the humans. It was just a better way to put it. Why? Jilin expressed his surprise at the current situation. We've already dealt with the third prince in the mobile city. Logically speaking, beast men with weapons and equipment should be much stronger than humans. How can we still be suppressed by humans? The golden spaceship of the Middle Empire is a bit tricky to deal with. We beast men haven't fought with it before, and the beast men who can fly haven't found a good way to deal with it. Got it, Jilin said faintly. Wait until I've recovered, then I'll kill them all. But Sing was obviously doubtful. No problem. Jilin said, if the Elven Queen can shoot a second arrow, I'm afraid I'll be dead. Moreover, I'll be prepared in the future. She won't be able to hit me. Then, Beast King, how long will it take for you to recover? Give me another 4 days. During this time, don't fight with the humans anymore. There's no need for casualties now. If we want to defeat the humans, we must have enough numbers. Yes. Sing cupped his fists. Buzz buzz, Sing suddenly felt a vibration coming from his waist. He was slightly stunned. Then, he took out an iron plate from his waist pocket. What's this? Jilin tilted his head. In reply to the Beast King, this is a new transmission artifact made by the dwarves. Jilin frowned slightly. The Dwarf King is really good. What's the matter? Sing listened for a while, then suddenly looked up. The Dwarf King said that a group of humans is rushing towards us. Their direction should be. Sing's expression suddenly became interesting. Instantly, his lion face looked honest and cute. Sing pointed to the sky blankly. They seem to want to invade Red Dragon City from this crater. Oh. Jilin could not help but laugh. He looked up at the sky outside the crater. He thought to himself that the human's intelligence was really a fluctuating thing. Sometimes, they were so smart that even he was surprised. Sometimes, they were so stupid that it surprised him. Going straight to the root of the problem sounded very imposing and seemed to save a lot of trouble. However, one wrong move could easily turn them into walking into a trap. Knowing that there were tigers on the mountain, they still walked towards the Tiger Mountain. Only those who could come down from the Tiger Mountain could be called heroes. Those who could not come down were the stubborn and stupid passers-by that the waiter at the restaurant at the foot of the mountain used to persuade the customers to take a detour. Jilin really did not understand where those humans got their confidence from. Once he was injured, those arrogant humans became hot-blooded. It was time for them to wake up. The dignity of the Megalosaurus could not be violated by mere humans even when it was on the brink of death. Moreover, Jilin believed that he was far from being on the brink of death. Are they here? Jilin looked up. A group of human figures jumped into the white light pillar one after another like sharp arrows. The strong white light perfectly covered their figures, however, Jilin could see them. Because Jilin had excellent eyesight. Moreover, this light was originally from him. Jilin sighed softly. Now, the surroundings of the crater had been dug up from top to bottom by the dwarves. Neat caves were dug near the crater. Wounded beastmen soldiers were placed everywhere. The Red Dragon Palace was not the only place where the orcs received treatment. If the humans were to come in, the orc soldiers would suffer heavy casualties. Just as Jilin was thinking, Sing's roar suddenly sounded. Red Dragon City, prepare to face the enemy. War mode activated. Following Sing's roar, a series of roars sounded one after another. Stone walls kept falling down, completely isolating the caves from the crater, perfectly protecting the beastmen warriors. Since the dwarves had dug a cave, naturally, it was not just a simple cave. If they did not do something to show off their abilities, how could they live up to the reputation of the dwarves? Jilin was also very surprised. Looking at the flowing light and the flashing symbols on the stone walls, he suddenly had some confidence in the sturdiness of the stone walls. Unknowingly, the Red Dragon Palace had stopped sending in the injured. The injured soldiers that were sent in earlier also walked out one after another. The battlefield had been cleared. When the last soldier stood up, Jilin stopped his hand seal and his floating body landed on the ground. The towering white light pillar gradually faded until it disappeared. Everything in the crater suddenly became clear. The figures of Sword Saint and the others appeared. They were standing on a protruding stone wall in the crater. It seemed like they wanted to quietly come down, quietly approach Jilin, and then ambush him. Jilin quietly looked at the legends, and the legends returned Jilin's gaze. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Chapter 357. The pillar of light suddenly disappeared, and they suddenly looked at each other. It was a moment of silence. It was because Jilin was full of confidence, and also because the humans were caught off guard. Everyone had different opinions about this short moment of silence. In the face of my immense might, these humans are completely terrified. Jilin thought to himself. We bear the fate of humanity and the world on our backs, and finally stand in front of the Red Calamity. We are calm, and our gazes are as sharp as knives. We are about to start an epic battle. War King looked at Jilin, his eyes surging with fighting spirit. The current situation is very awkward. We are like thieves sneaking into a dark house in the middle of the night. We thought that the owner was asleep, but we didn't expect that the owner would turn on the lights as soon as we entered. It's really awkward. The Pope would describe this moment of silence to others countless times over the years. Jilin landed on his mountain of treasures and changed into a comfortable posture, straightforwardly expressing the fact that he didn't care about these humans at all. He raised his index finger and pointed at the pair of humans. A sword user, a fighter, a white-haired one, and a son of God. They're quite complete. The Red Calamity has discovered us. The Pope said softly. Nonsense. Sword Saint turned around and rolled his eyes at the Pope. Why is it white-haired when it comes to me? Is that a characteristic? Shut up. Musin also turned around and glared at the Pope. The Son of God is my ancestor. War King looked at Jilin and said, I only have the bloodline of the gods that was passed down. What are you people doing here? Jilin licked his sharp teeth. If you're here to die, why come so far? Red Calamity, we're here to kill you today. Sword Saint pointed his sword at Jilin. With just this sword, he fully displayed the style of a master. I know that. Jilin grinned as if he was laughing. But with your little strength, aren't you overestimating yourselves? A bunch of ants, how are you going to kill me? Of course. The Pope said, of course, we won't kill you just like that. We've prepared a greeting gift for you. Take a look, Red Calamity. This is the power of humans. Bright Snow Divine Weapon. As the Pope yelled, many green light spots appeared in the red sky of Red Dragon City. They fell towards the Red Dragon Palace like meteors. In the blink of an eye, a few hundred human-sized bright snow godly soldiers filled the crater of the volcano, their bodies emitting green light. The golden light in Jilin's eyes congealed, and a rare solemn look appeared on his face. He was too familiar with this thing. When this thing first appeared in the Snow Wind Empire, it split his great fireball technique into two with its own strength. Later on, when they arrived at the Qian-Kun Great Array, Jilin personally repaired thousands of bright snow divine weapons. Relying on the great power of the explosion, the god's body was covered in wounds. This thing had the power to harm gods. Dragon breath. All of a sudden, Qilin released his dragon breath into the sky. The red, high-temperature beam instantly filled the entire crater of the volcano. In such a narrow space like the crater of the volcano, the humans had nowhere to hide. After 2 or 3 seconds, Qilin slowly closed his mouth. Black burn marks appeared on the walls of the crater of the volcano. There was only one exception. It was the protruding stone wall where the humans were standing. Hundreds of bright snow divine weapons were arranged in a strange semicircle, forming a semicircle barrier that completely protected the humans. Despicable. The Pope yelled at Qilin. Why did you suddenly start fighting? Oh? Didn't we already exchange greetings? Qilin said. Qilin was a little unhappy in his heart. He had clearly cooperated with these humans, but they still wanted a yard after taking an inch. Beast King, those human weapons can form a barrier. The Dwarf King's god-slaying cannon was blocked by those things. Sing saw that Qilin was a little shocked. He said in a deep voice. Can they block the god-slaying cannon? Qilin glanced at Sing. Why don't you wait until tomorrow? Huh? Sing was stunned. Nothing. Qilin waved his hand. He was too lazy to talk to him. Then, he pulled out the dragon scale sword. Qilin raised the sword with both hands. He flapped his wings and soared into the sky. He charged toward the green hemisphere. He suddenly slashed with the sword. The huge sword that was almost 100 meters long cut through the air. It whistled as if it had the power to split the sky and earth. This was the result of Qilin taking into account that there was not enough space in the crater of the volcano. Clang! With a loud bang, the volcano began to shake violently. The magma under the Red Dragon Palace started to churn violently. It was like a turbulent sea. 3 or 4 bright snow divine weapons suddenly lost all their light and fell from the green hemisphere. They fell into the magma with a bang and turned into green smoke. So that was it. The creations of humans were still inferior to the gods. Qilin's face suddenly revealed a smug and dangerous expression. Then, he began to wave the dragon scale sword in his hand. The dragon scale sword landed on the green light sphere like a storm. A few bright snow divine weapons fell from the light sphere from time to time. Is it injured? The Pope frowned. What should we do? I didn't expect the Red Calamity to be so powerful. Musin asked. We've wasted too much time. No one expected it to recover so quickly. Sword Saint patted Musin's shoulder, indicating that he did not need to be so frustrated. This was indeed something that no one could have predicted. Should we fight or run? Sword Saint looked around and asked. The Red Calamity is injured after all. Warlord looked at the nightmarish Qilin outside the barrier. Not only was he not afraid, he could even see a hint of pretense in Qilin's storm-like attacks. He made his stance clear with one sentence. I agree, Warlord. Musin was the first to speak. Even if this isn't the best timing, it's our only chance. Guy Minghua said in a deep voice. Sigh. The Pope let out a sigh. That's true. If we leave without doing anything after coming here, it would be a little embarrassing. The 4 of them looked at each other. Although they had different identities and personalities, their eyes were filled with determination. To fight or to run, there was no need to ask this question. This was because they had already seen their own ending before coming here. They were all prepared to die. This was because even if they could kill Qilin, they could not kill their way out of the Red Dragon Palace after the battle. For someone like Sing, they could ignore him if he had a bright snow divine weapon. But if he did not, the only person who could possibly survive this operation was the Battle King. Everyone had already given up on the idea of risking their lives. They only asked this question to encourage themselves. Get into formation. Shan Wang shouted. The green light sphere scattered and turned into a huge green firework. The 4 of them took the opportunity to spread out. Then, they firmly occupied the 4 positions around Jilin. The hundreds of bright snow divine weapons split into 4 and gathered around the 4 of them. Then, they gradually transformed into 4 huge green light swords. The 4 of them each occupied the position of the sword tip. They looked at Jilin and shouted in unison. Celestial Slaying Sword Formation. What the hell is this? Jilin was shocked. His face was filled with astonishment. Chapter 358. Immortal Slaying Sword Formation? What kind of joke is this group of humans playing? Jilin looked at the 4 green light swords that were slightly shabby compared to this name and really didn't know what to say. To be honest, these humans really stunned him. The Immortal Slaying Sword Formation, this thing really did exist in Jilin's bloodline inheritance. According to legend, it was the #1 killing formation in the universe that could destroy the heavens and earth, killing gods and Buddhas in their way. According to the description in Jilin's bloodline inheritance, using this killing formation to kill him seemed to be a bit of a waste. Logically speaking, as soon as this killing formation was set up, Jilin should have instantly turned into dust. But no, Jilin, was still standing here. What did this mean? This immortal slaying sword formation was fake. These humans were completely making things up. When Jilin thought of this, he only felt 2 flames burning in his eyes. However, this was the truth. When 2 sounds and the others saw 2 clusters of golden flames appear in Jilin's eyes with a bang, they were a little confused for a moment. They thought, what kind of new move is this from Red Disaster? Why haven't I seen it before? They also didn't expect that Jilin was completely angered by them. Heh! Immortal Slaying Sword Formation? Jilin was so angry that he laughed. Where did you hear this name? Sword Saint said aloud, this is a secret of the Middle Empire. Humph! Jilin snorted in disdain. Is this how you set up the Immortal Slaying Sword Formation? To set up the Immortal Slaying Sword Formation, at least have the Immortal Slaying Sword. What's the use of just these puppets? Where's your Immortal Slaying Sword? Everyone fell silent. They didn't expect Red Disaster to suddenly discuss the Immortal Slaying Sword Formation with them. Moreover, they also knew that as a dragon, Jilin would not easily lie, and there was no need to lie. Since the Red Disaster said so, there was a high chance that it was true. The 3 of them looked at Sword Saint. The Sword Saint slowly shook his head, indicating that he had never heard of the Sword of Execution. However, since it was a sword that even Red Calamity knew about, as a Sword Saint, he naturally couldn't just leave it at that. What kind of sword is the Zhu Xian sword? Was it powerful? Does the Zhu Immortal Sword have to be used to set up the Zhu Immortal Grand Formation? The Sword Saint asked. Not really, Jilin said after thinking for a while. Oh. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it wasn't necessary, it wasn't a big problem. However, before everyone could feel relieved, they heard Jilin continue, other than the Celestial Eradication Sword, there's also the Celestial Entrapping Sword, the Celestial Culling Sword, the Celestial Eradication Sword, and the Celestial Eradication Sword. Nonsense. The Sword Saint roared, the Immortal Punishing Formation has been passed down for thousands of years in the Middle Empire. Immortal Punishing Swords and formation diagrams have never been heard of before. Red Calamity, cut the crap and die. Jilin licked his fangs. He kind of understood. Perhaps the Zhu Immortal Sword Formation that the one with the sword spoke of had nothing to do with the Zhu Immortal Sword Formation that he understood. Maybe the humans of this world who created this formation felt that their formation was capable of destroying heaven and earth. Killing immortals and gods would be a cinch, so the name Zhu Immortal was appropriate and named it that way. It was purely a coincidence, he was thinking too much, but then again, even if the world was different, the humans' desire to kill immortals and gods was still the same. Just as Jilin's imagination was running wild, the humans had already launched their attack. The Zhu Immortal Sword Formation was activated. The 4 green swords of light cooperated with each other. The formation was mysterious and powerful. The swords flashed from time to time, condensing into lines. covering the entire space of the formation. The lines condensed from the swords were extremely thin, but also extremely sharp. As if they could cut everything within the formation into dust. And the range of this formation just so happened to cover the entire volcanic crater. Jilin couldn't avoid it. Fighting for a geographical advantage has always been a human's obsession and instinct. In just a few breaths of time, Jilin's body had already been hit by dozens of swords. His scales made clanging sounds. The power of hundreds of bright snow divine weapons compressed together into lines was not to be underestimated. Jilin felt that if he stayed here for half a day without moving, it might really be dangerous. With that thought, Jilin raised his dragon scale sword. The long and narrow pupils in his golden eyes became even smaller. This meant that Jilin was carefully observing. He was looking. Gradually, Jilin saw the formation diagram of the Zhu Immortal Sword formation. He's about to make a move. Muzin shouted. Jilin was about to make a move. Everyone could see that. The reason why the King of Fighters shouted this was because it was a secret signal. I didn't expect him to use his trump card so quickly. The Pope mumbled softly. Then, the Pope took out a purple crystal from his white Pope robe. Jilin frowned. He felt that this scene was extremely familiar. This action of taking out a purple crystal was clearly exclusive to Aisha. The Pope crushed the crystal. The purple crystal turned into sparkling dust that filled the sky and instantly covered Jilin's surroundings. Jilin felt that it was even more familiar. He did not understand why this white-haired guy and Aisha liked to crush crystals like this. Taboo scripture. The Pope made a gesture of the Church of Light. Holy light rose around him like flames. He slowly opened his eyes, which were also shining with holy light. The dazzling holy light turned his white hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes into a bright golden color. The Pope at this moment was incomparably holy. He really was the representative of the God of Light. The Pope looked at Jilin and slowly said, "Temple of Light." At this moment, the Pope's voice had completely changed. It became grand and solemn. It was as if the God of Light had used his mouth to transmit his voice. The radiant God's temple appeared and completely enveloped Crimson Lin. The eight-winged God of Light sat upright on the divine throne and pointed at Red Lin from afar. In an instant, the world was empty. The wind was gone, the water was gone, and the fire was gone. Everything was gone. Only the light existed. Jilin suddenly felt that he could not move. It was not the kind of immobility where he was restrained. It was the kind of immobility where he could not control his own body. However, he could still feel it. He could still feel the feeling of the green light falling on his body. Jilin suddenly understood why he could not move. It was because there was no time here. This was the temple of the God of Light. There was only the law of the God of Light here. It did not even have the most basic law of time. It was a pity that the caster was a human. Taboo scripture? Warlord glanced at the Pope. I didn't expect the Church of Light to have such a technique. They really hid it well. They can actually imprison the Red Disaster. How shocking, Sword Saint said. You, the Pope, actually know how to use witches' techniques? Muzin's eyes were sharp. He did not miss the dazzling purple crystal. Stop talking nonsense. The Pope said. I won't be able to use this technique for long. The Pope gestured for them to attack quickly. At the same time, blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Even as the Pope, he had only learned the taboo scripture not long ago. Only now did he realize that there was a reason why the taboo scripture was listed as a taboo. Chapter 359. Following the Pope's voice, the celestial slaying sword once again launched a fierce attack. Like hailstones, it continuously landed on Jilin's body, producing loud bangs. Sing's eyes turned red as he watched from below. He roared from time to time, but he did not act rashly. This was because he clearly knew that even if he sacrificed his life, it would be insignificant to both sides. The hundreds of bright snow divine soldiers behind the four of them were all much stronger than him. Furthermore, he could not block a single one of the green rays that landed on Jilin's body. Perhaps if Muzin were to divert his attention and give him some of the rays, he would be severely injured. "Beast King!" Sing anxiously shouted. "Don't panic," a calm voice sounded, and everyone could not help but be stunned. Even the rain-like green rays paused. This was because that was Jilin's voice. In the Temple of Light, where there were no laws of time, Jilin actually moved and could even speak. Impossible. The Pope's pupils shrunk to the size of a needle. Clearly, this had a huge impact on him. "How did you move without time? You're just a mere human. Don't be too arrogant." Jilin slowly tightened his wings and placed his sword in front of his chest. Slowly, following a mysterious trajectory, he slashed out with the sword that cut through the river of time. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of the sword being unsheathed, a straight and thin crack appeared on the Temple of Light. Jilin's sword had actually split the entire Temple of Light into two from the middle. The Temple of Light slowly separated, and the evil Megalosaurus that was trapped within was about to regain its freedom. It would bring endless blood and fire to the living beings on this land. "Pope?" The warlord shouted loudly. The current situation was very different from what they had predicted. The Pope ignored the warlord because he had nothing to say at this moment, and there was nothing he could do. Furthermore, he still thought that he was innocent. Just like how you brought a few teammates to go up the mountain to catch a bear. You set up traps near the bear's cave and even brought the sturdiest net. You were just waiting for the bear to come out. In the end, after the bear came out, it looked at you, extended a pair of wings, and flew away. How could you be blamed for this? This could only be blamed on that flying bear. It was too unreasonable. Finally, Jilin fully spread its wings under the Pope's strenuous support. The Temple of Light shattered. The eyes of the four people were all covered with a layer of shadow. At this point, the legendary plan to slay the dragon could be said to have been mostly destroyed. A few hundred bright snow divine soldiers, we still have a fighting chance. Sword Saint shouted. "I'm afraid it's still a little difficult to kill the Red Disaster," Muzin hurriedly said. "Why don't we stake everything and take a gamble?" The other three fell silent for a moment. They all understood what the Fist Emperor meant. Sword Saint was the first to speak. "That's quite straightforward." The Pope laughed bitterly. "If that's the case, I'm afraid I won't even know if I've won or lost. But this is the method with the highest chance of success. If we try our best and still can't get rid of the Red Disaster, we can only say that, this is the will of the heavens. Forget it. We'll cross that bridge when we get there." War King looked at the Red Disaster and gritted his teeth. There are countless heroes in the world, but who can care about what happens after they die? Bright snow divine soldiers, prepare to self-destruct. You guys are talking to yourselves. You're having a good time. Jilin looked coldly at these humans. He was furious and let out a cruel sneer. It seemed like these people really didn't take him seriously. Jilin was all too familiar with the bright snow divine soldiers. It could even be said that there was no creature in this world that was more familiar with the bright snow divine soldiers than Jilin. He had seen the real bright snow divine soldiers from the mythological era in the universe world. Furthermore, Jilin had pieced together a few thousand usable bright snow divine soldiers from the wreckage on the ground. These were just replicas of the current humans. However, because of this understanding, Jilin was also somewhat fearful. He knew how terrifying the power of the self-destruction of this thing was. He had once used this thing's self-destruction to cause his divine body to be filled with cracks. Jilin didn't think that he could be stronger than that thing. Even when it was covered in wounds and cracks, he had still broken a few of his nails and teeth when fighting it. Therefore, when he saw these things, Jilin was wary of the human's move. Jilin believed that he had a perfect countermeasure against the self-destruction of the bright snow divine soldiers. Before the bright snow divine soldiers self-destructed, there would be a pause of 4 to 5 seconds. This was because they needed a process of energy flowing back to the core. For humans, these 4 to 5 seconds might not be able to do anything. However, for Jilin, it was enough for him to do many things. For example, use a spell. Dragon language spell, End of Fire. Jilin didn't know many dragon language spells. To be more precise, he only knew this one. However, it was also his most powerful move. This was a spell that could open up a fire domain. It was the law of burning everything. A dragon's roar rang out. Jilin's domain covered the entire volcano. There weren't many other elements to begin with, but they were completely burned. The domain instantly became a space filled with only fire elements. In such a space, Jilin was the only god, the only ruler. Jilin looked at these bright snow divine soldiers. With a thought, the bright snow divine soldiers suddenly burst into flames, and they burned extremely quickly. It was as if these human-killing weapons weren't made of steel, but made of butter. The bright snow divine soldiers didn't even self-destruct before they melted into pools of molten iron. It was like a yellow rain. The raindrops were huge, falling into the lava lake below, splashing countless red flowers. The air was filled with the smell of melting steel. Why? Sword Saint looked at Jilin and asked. He didn't know why Jilin didn't kill them immediately. If he could melt the bright snow divine soldiers, he could easily melt them as well. Jilin flicked his fingers. Don't worry, I still have a special impression of humans like you. As intelligent creatures, if you can't even feel death in the end, wouldn't that be too sad? You mean, you won't let us die too easily? The Pope asked. At this moment, his face and hair had become even paler. That's not what I meant, but you can understand it that way. Jilin pointed at the Pope. Let's start with you. As Jilin's finger moved, countless fire elements began to move towards the Pope. The Pope could feel a shadow slowly enveloping his entire body, even his soul. Once this shadow completely engulfed him, it would mean the arrival of death. To be able to clearly feel death approaching you step by step was not a good feeling for any human. So this is the feeling of death. What a wicked dragon. Chapter 360. The feeling of death slowly crept in and a great fear crept towards the Pope. As his life was about to end, the Pope let out a long sigh in his heart. After living for more than 200 years and standing at the peak of the human race for so many years, the Pope thought that he had seen through life and death and was even a little tired of living. Unexpectedly, there was still an instinctive fear in his heart, and a trace of regret. Forget it. From the moment the Pope realized that death was coming to him to calmly accept it, he only took a very short time to adjust his state of mind. His mind was firm and he did not fear death. In the eyes of humans, this was a great person, a person who could do great things. Although His Highness the Pope acted frivolously and strangely all his life, he lived up to his name. Jilin looked at the Pope, who had calmed down and his eyelids twitched. That was why he did not like humans. Could a creature who could overcome its instincts with its mind still be considered a creature? Thinking about it seriously, perhaps they were just a group of monsters that occupied the world in a vast number of numbers. There were thousands of species in the world. How could humans walk on two legs? If humans called a minority as monsters, then how could the 1 in a million two-legged land creatures not be called monsters? It turned out that humans were the largest and most numerous monsters in the world. Compared to them, the dragon race was more like the original creatures of the world. Jilin looked at the dying Pope and gained an inexplicable sense of superiority in a short moment. The Pope's white robe began to burn. The other three wanted to help the Pope, but within Jilin's domain, they could not do anything at all. The Pope's death had become a certainty in the future. That was what everyone thought. Bang! A soft sound came from behind the Pope. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Jilin also narrowed his eyes. He did not know what unexpected things could happen in his domain. A purple flame suddenly ignited behind the Pope's back. It expanded rapidly and instantly enveloped the Pope. The purple flame burned fiercely. Finally, from the embers of the flame, only a circular piece of cloth slowly floated down. The Pope was nowhere to be seen. Jilin's eyes narrowed so much that it looked like they were about to close. He was now completely dumbfounded. The moment the purple flames ignited, Jilin gave the command to extinguish. However, the flames did not extinguish. There was actually a Huiyan that didn't listen to his orders in his domain. This was undoubtedly a big deal for Jilin. Jilin took the round tattered cloth and glanced at it. The golden light in Jilin's eyes suddenly brightened. The outside of the cloth, which was originally white, had long been burned black like charcoal. As for the inside, it was as good as new. Because on the inside of the cloth, there was a magic array embroidered with extremely thin threads. The silk thread was so thin that if one didn't know beforehand, they probably wouldn't be able to feel it even if they used their hands to touch it. If the Pope were to wear it, it would be even harder to detect it. Jilin understood everything, but he still couldn't accept it. At this moment, the biggest thought in Jilin's mind was, Aisha, you actually have such skills? Are you a good wife and mother? When it came to magic arrays, one couldn't be the slightest bit off. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. But Aisha could actually embroider such a powerful teleportation magic array with needle and thread. What kind of craftsmanship was this? Perhaps even the best embroiderer in the world would secretly wipe away 2 drops of crystal clear tears and secretly sigh at their inferiority when they saw this work. Jilin looked at this magic array and couldn't help but marvel at Aisha's genius idea. A teleportation magic array could be used in the form of combustion. No wonder it could still be used in my domain. No wonder this flame didn't listen to my orders. But then again, even if Aisha was exceptionally talented and had superb craftsmanship, how much effort did it take to embroider such a magic array? She really put in a lot of effort and care. Why didn't I notice it before? This thread seems to be hair. Jilin was suddenly shocked. Jilin knew how much Aisha treasured her hair. It could be said that she really fought for every hair. Back when she taught Bane the magic to summon Xiao He, she didn't even bear to use a single strand of her hair. According to her, her body would no longer grow. For things like hair, pulling out a strand was equivalent to losing a strand of hair. In other words, a peerless beauty like Aisha actually had the risk of going bald. Just thinking about it was cruel. But Aisha was actually willing to use her hair for the Pope. Heaven and earth moved. But, when he thought about how Aisha embroidered her hair into the Pope's clothes, why did it feel a little creepy when he thought about it? Jilin's tail couldn't help but tremble as he thought about it. When he thought about how the Pope almost lost his life in his hands, Jilin really felt a little guilty. Forget it, if that's the case, then so be it. What a scary woman, that one ran away, these 3. Jilin turned to look at Sword Saint and the others. Do you have any escape cards? Jilin asked. If you do, then hurry up and use them. Sword Saint and the other 2 were silent. It seemed like they didn't have any. Jilin nodded in satisfaction. Red Calamity. Suddenly, a loud shout came from the sky above. Jilin looked up and saw an extremely dazzling human standing at the mouth of the volcano. Her long hair was as bright as gold and her face was beautiful. But she also had a resolute look. Her body was slender and she wore a full body white armor. But even so, it couldn't hide her curvaceous body. In her hand was a sword that emitted a huge light. Even Jilin felt that the sword was somewhat dazzling. Because that was the holy sword that the God of Light had personally bestowed upon the world. Ha! The person shouted and ignored the volcano's height of a few hundred meters and jumped down from the mouth of the volcano. Dong! The person stood steadily in front of Jilin. The volcanic rocks under her feet shattered into countless pieces. She looked up at Jilin without a trace of fear in her eyes. She was majestic, like a heavenly soldier descending from the heavens. A peerless hero was nothing more than this. This person's jump made Jilin tremble in fear. He hurriedly withdrew his territory. Jilin thought to himself, at such a high distance, you would have fallen into the lava lake if you jumped a little bit off. Such a heroic entrance could be said to be perfect. But unfortunately, the hero's follower was too embarrassing. At this time, she was climbing down the volcano's wall bit by bit. She looked wretched, like a thief. Red Calamity, I am the princess of the Simai Empire, the holy maiden of the light, Staya. Today, under the orders of the god of light, I will take your life with my holy sword to save the world. Die! Staya pointed her sword at the Megalosaurus and looked very confident. Bane finally climbed down from the wall. He rushed half a step behind Staya and pointed at Jilin. That's right, die. Chapter 361. Jilin lowered his head and placed it very close to Staya. Staya could even clearly see her and Bane's reflections in the golden dragon eyes, as well as the tiny scales on Jilin's eyelids. Staya suddenly had an evil thought. Could she blind Jilin's eyes if she stabbed him with her sword? After hesitating for a while, Staya didn't try. Since Jilin placed his eyes so close to her, it meant that Jilin didn't even care about her. How dare you come back, human? Jilin looked at Bane. Speak. Where did you hide her? Being stared at by Jilin's threatening gaze, Bane, who thought he had gotten used to the dragon aura, couldn't move at all. His whole body was stiff. Staya stepped in front of Bane and held her sword in the middle. She was like a rock in the middle of a river. She sliced the dragon aura that was like a tidal wave in the middle. Bane finally let out a sigh of relief. You're such a big dragon, and you have so many demons and monsters under your command in the Red Dragon City. Why are you bullying a weak girl? Aren't you afraid that people will laugh at you and ruin the reputation of the dragon race? I'm doing this for your own good. He touched his huge lion head, and his bell-like eyes were filled with confusion. He thought to himself that there were no demons and monsters in the Red Dragon City. A cold laugh came from Jilin's mouth. He made up his mind that if this human couldn't return the princess, he would definitely kill him. Gulp. Bane swallowed a big mouthful of saliva, and his legs couldn't stop shaking. It seemed like this wasn't going to end so easily. Master Sword Saint, Master Fist King, protect the warlord and leave first. Leave the red disaster to me. Staya turned her head and said hurriedly, Oh yeah, where's the Pope? Sword Saint and the others frowned and didn't say anything. The first half of the Saint's sentence was very problematic. But when the second half of the sentence came out, they couldn't ask any questions. What's wrong? Staya looked at Sword Saint. The Sword Saint shifted his gaze to Jilin's right claw. Staya followed Sword Saint's gaze, and her entire body trembled. Jilin's claws were grabbing a pitch-black cloth. The cloth was burned beyond recognition, and it was impossible to tell what it was. However, when she thought about how Sword Saint and the others looked like they wanted to say something, Staya understood. You burned His Highness the Pope to death? Staya blurted out. But as soon as the words left her mouth, Staya felt that something was wrong. If Jilin was the one who burned her to death, how could there be such a piece of cloth left? As expected, Jilin shook his head. It wasn't me, it was Aisha. Jilin handed the cloth to Staya and showed Staya the magic circle that Aisha made herself. It was truly a miracle. Staya felt that the pattern on the cloth was familiar, and instinctively reached out to take it. In that short moment, Jilin suddenly reached behind Staya and grabbed Bane. Hey! Bane turned pale with fright. Jilin, let's talk this out. Calm down. Jilin, let him go. Staya yelled. But Jilin couldn't hear what Staya was saying. Seeing this traitor, Jilin was furious. He thought that this place was perfect for imprisoning a human. In the end, it was leaked from the hands of this traitor. He was the only human in Red Dragon City. Tell me, where is he? Jilin grabbed Bane and pressed his thumb on Bane's head. His meaning was obvious. Gentler. Bane yelled. He looked embarrassed and pathetic. He didn't look like the Shadow at all. He was like the first batch of traitors when two countries were at war. He had no integrity at all. Sword Saint and the others felt their cheeks heat up. They couldn't bear to look at him. Normally, to the king of fighters and warlord, Bane was just a stranger, a foreigner, and weak. Everything about him had nothing to do with them. But in front of the Red Disaster, all humans could be counted as one of their own. Seeing how cowardly his own race was, Warlord's face darkened. But Bane couldn't care less about that now. He didn't care if anyone looked down on him. Jilin, he's in Aisha's hands. Facing Jilin's threat, Bane didn't even want to hold on for a second. He gave his orders without hesitation. Jilin nodded. This answer was similar to what he thought. People like Aisha wouldn't let go of anyone or anything that was in her hands unless she squeezed all the value out of them. Then where's Aisha? Jilin asked. Bane shook his head. When he came out, he was teleported out. He didn't know where the underground room was. Okay. Jilin sneered. Then why should I keep you? I can help you find Aisha. Bane said hurriedly. You? Jilin said disdainfully. If you could find her, would she have been able to do evil all these years? Xiao He. There's Xiao He. Bane quickly said the excuse that he had prepared beforehand. Xiao He was summoned with my hair. Now that Aisha is with her all the time, you can find her through me. Jilin was silent for a moment. Finding Aisha through a little crow. He couldn't deny this. If it was true, it would be too easy. But no matter what, it was still feasible. Although the possibility of success was very low, there was no harm in trying. How do we find her? Jilin asked. The Church of Light developed a secret technique during the war with the witches. If we can find the witches through the tamed demons, we can also do it the other way around. Staya said, but it has to be alive. Hearing Staya's words, Jilin didn't have much hope. Since it was the Church of Light's traditional secret technique, Aisha had to be on guard, but it was still worth a try. Okay, let's try. Jilin finally put Bane down. Bane was still in shock, but he let out a long sigh of relief. Then these three. Jilin glanced at Sword Saint and the others. Now that Ming Shui's heavenly weapon had exploded, they had nothing to rely on in front of Jilin. You can't touch these three. Staya took a step forward, full of vigor. Leave now. Sword Saint and the others paused for a moment, then turned around and left. They turned into 3 rays of light and dashed towards the crater. They heard the conversation between Jilin and Staya. The 3 of them agreed that the Saint of Light should be fine. Jilin was stunned. He didn't know where Staya got her confidence from. You came to the Red Dragon Palace to cause trouble, and you think you can leave just like that? Jilin. Stop. Staya jumped high in front of Jilin, holding the holy sword high, as if she could cut everything in half. Jilin held his breath. He had to stop the dragon breath that he was about to spit out. Jilin held back, but Staya attacked decisively and cleanly. Clang. Her sword hit Jilin's nose. It was the sound of metal hitting stone. Staya flew backwards. Her hands were numb and trembling. Jilin also took half a step back. What was Staya trying to do? He really didn't understand. Chapter 362. Jilin narrowed his eyes and looked up. Sword Saint and the other 2 had long disappeared from the sky. The 3 of them disappeared in the blink of an eye like graceful birds. They ran so fast. Sing, chase after them and kill them. Jilin waved his hand and shouted. He signaled Sing to chase after them. Although the lives of Sword Saint and the others were insignificant to him, it did not matter whether they were dead or alive. However, if he really let these troublemakers escape unscathed, Jilin would feel very uncomfortable in his heart. Don't worry, Beast King. Sing shouted and left with his sword. He was very confident about this mission, and it was exactly what he had been looking for. The King of Fighters, Musin, and the Warlord had been suppressing the orcs for so many years. Today, they finally had a chance to be proud. Stop! Staya panicked and blocked Sing. She could not let Sing chase after the Warlord and the others. If it was a normal situation, the warlord and the king of fighters, Sword Saint, would be the strongest fighting force of the humans. Not to mention Sing, they would not even be afraid of any three legends. However, the three of them had just finished fighting with Jilin. All of them were severely injured, and their organs were damaged. Moreover, they were in Mount Gerda. They had the bright snow god weapon to protect them, but now, they had to constantly defend against the attacks. In such a situation, the ordinary guards outside Red Dragon City were already an inescapable net. Once Sing caught up, the three of them would be in a very dangerous situation. Fire cage. A golden light flashed in Jilin's eyes. Two cages formed by flames were instantly formed, trapping Staya and Bane. Staya instinctively took a step back. Sing took the opportunity and rushed out. Sing took out his microphone as he ran. Dwarf King, Musin and the warlord are running away. Stop them. Damn it. Staya instantly slashed out countless times. The fire cage kept shaking. However, it could not hold on any longer after a few seconds. It collapsed with a shattering sound. However, in just a few seconds, Staya had already lost the chance to stop Sing. Jilin. Staya pointed her sword at Jilin. Stop. Jilin blinked his eyes, feeling very puzzled. Where did this come from? Why are you holding this sword? Jilin asked. Do you know that this sword can't even pierce through my scales? Didn't Bane tell you what happened to the last human who held this sword? At that time, his face was filled with despair as if he had been deceived by the whole world. Even I couldn't help but sympathize with him. Enough. That's not how you use the word sympathy. Staya was furious. Many of the human vocabulary that Jilin knew were taught by Staya, but now Staya had the feeling of regret. It was like an old boxer teaching all his skills to his disciple. However, the disciple mastered the skills and went to cause trouble in the world in the blink of an eye. Regret. Staya calmed herself down and looked at Jilin seriously. She said earnestly, Jilin, this war is endless. We have to stop it. Jilin did not care. Give him to me. No, Staya said. Jilin was dazed. Then why should we stop? Because you can't achieve the final victory. It's pointless to fight now. Staya said. Jilin said with disdain. After I recover completely, we will win completely. The humans will be at my mercy. But you can't kill all the humans, Staya said faintly. I have the orcs and dwarves, Jilin said. It's the same. You can't kill all of them. Stee fixed her gaze on Jilin. There was not a trace of hesitation or wavering in her eyes. It was as if her words were a truth that did not need to be discussed in this world. So cool. Bane in the fire cage looked at Staya, who didn't waver at all. He felt that he lost again. Facing Staya like this, even Jilin didn't have the ability to refute her. Jilin thought for a while. He looked at Staya and said slowly, how do you want to stop? Half a day later. In the human camp. There was a sea of people, and the endless campsite was quiet. However, the atmosphere in the enormous allied human army was so gloomy that it couldn't be any worse. The sound of the soldiers training, the loud voice of the officers arranging the defense, and the clanging sound of the meals being prepared in the past all became soft at this moment. Many soldiers didn't know what happened, but their sharp senses trained on the battlefield made them realize that something was wrong today. Therefore, each and every one of them was very careful and could even be said to be trembling in fear. In the camp of the cooks, a thin young man from the Middle Empire was sitting on a small wooden chair. He was wearing a red cloth shirt. In front of him, there were a few pots of potatoes that were piled up like a mountain. The young man looked at the potatoes in his hand attentively. He was holding a special peeling knife. His wrist shook, and the knife flashed. The potatoes were stripped of their outer layers as they tumbled. The young man looked at the naked potatoes in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. He put the potatoes into the big pot filled with water behind him and took a potato. His movements were natural and unrestrained, all done in one go. Old Wang, What do you think is going on today? It's almost time to eat. Why is it so quiet? The young man asked without raising his head. Although he was talking, he didn't stop working. At the entrance of the cook's camp, an old man was sitting on the stairs. He was holding a pipe. His body was covered in oil, and his hair was messy. He looked up and glanced at the young man. "Kid, how long have you been in the army?" Old Wang asked. The young man wasn't prepared for such a sudden question. He didn't answer for a while. After calculating in his heart for a while, he said, 5, 6 years? Yes. Old Wang sighed and measured in front of his chest. You were only this tall when I picked you up. The young man laughed foolishly. Not bad. You've been in the army for so many years. You've only grown a little. Nothing else. Old Wang suddenly scolded. You only know how to peel potatoes in the army. You don't know anything else. You won't even know how you died in the future. The young man lowered his head and smiled. He didn't care. Old Wang had a sharp tongue. He knew about it all these years. Old Wang saw that the young man didn't say anything. He snorted and said, My friend spread the news. Last night, Lord Sword Saint, War King, Pope, and King of Fighters ambushed the Red Disaster. They wanted to behead it. Oh? The young man finally stopped what he was doing and raised his head. His eyes lit up. The young men of the Middle Empire all had this reaction when they heard the word Sword Saint. It is said that in the end, only the Sword Saint walked out. Geezer Wang let out a heavy sigh and knocked the pipe against the soles of his shoes. The old man was melancholy. The human race was worried. They had lost 3 legends at once. The fall of War King was something the human race couldn't bear. Putting aside the title of the human race's strongest, he was the king of Nanqin. In this way, the people of the Nanqin Empire would be in chaos. The young man was also stunned. He sighed in his heart. Even a legend is dead. Then he lowered his head and continued peeling potatoes. To the young man, the fall of a legend or the death of War King wasn't as important as the potatoes in front of him. After all, wasn't Lord Sword Saint fine? People were too far away. What did his death have to do with him? He had to do the work in front of him. If he didn't finish it, he would starve. Chapter 363. Geezer Wang looked at the youth's indifferent expression, and anger rose in his heart. No matter what, Zhang Wang and the others were comrades in the army. Now that you're in trouble, even if you're not sad, you have to pretend. Geezer Wang stood up and limped towards the youth. It turned out that he was actually a cripple. The youth saw Geezer Wang walking towards him with difficulty, but he didn't care. He just continued with his work until his head was hit hard by the pipe. The youth covered the back of his head and looked at Geezer Wang in confusion. What are you doing? Stop peeling. Geezer Wang glared at the youth. Go out for a stroll. The youth was baffled. Then who peels this potato? The old man became even angrier. He snatched the peeling knife from the youth's hand. The big army cooks, I need you to peel potatoes. Get lost. The youth stood up helplessly, covered his head, and slowly walked out. Go out for a stroll. But where to go? The youth suddenly felt that the palm on his head was wet. He took it down and saw that it was bright red. F***CK. He was bleeding. Geezer Wang's hand was too vicious. Well, now there was a place to go. The youth sighed and walked towards the wounded barracks. When he arrived at the wounded barracks, the youth was shocked by the scene in front of him. There were groans and screams everywhere. Wounded soldiers were everywhere. The air was filled with the smell of blood and herbs. Countless doctors and Church of Light monks were so busy that their feet didn't touch the ground. They were all sweating profusely. But even so, the number of dead people being carried out never stopped. Ever since the mobile city entered the battlefield, the war between the human race and the beast race was no longer the main battlefield. It could only be considered a local conflict. But this local conflict still caused the human race to suffer heavy losses. Huff huff. Finally, a doctor stopped beside the youth. He was panting like a cow. Looking at the blood on the youth's forehead, he asked anxiously, "What happened to you? Let me take a look at you." The youth looked around at the groaning, bleeding, and missing arms and legs. He took a step back guiltily. "No need, no need. It's just a small injury. It's not worth mentioning." "Then what are you doing here?" The doctor rolled his eyes at the youth and turned to leave. The youth lowered his head in shame. He didn't want to look at the wounded soldiers. The hellish scene around him made him feel cold from the inside out. It was like ice was growing out of his bones. Look! Look at the sky! Bang! 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 All of a sudden, cries of surprise rang out from the surroundings, followed by the rapid sound of a golden gong, waking the young man up. This was the alarm signal. The youth looked towards the sky. The young man's voice was stuck in his throat. It was as if he had lost the ability to speak at this moment. In the far west, there was a huge volcano. That was the enemy's main camp. Standing at the youth's position, he could only vaguely see the shape of the mountain, but could not see it clearly. But for some reason, the creatures circling above the volcano could be seen clearly. Thick and solid legs, a long tail, a red body, and a pair of powerful wings, red. Red. The young man knew that it was him with a single glance, and he believed that countless humans were the same. The young man's body stiffened, unable to move. Is this the human's enemy? Is this the enemy of a legend? Roar! The red disaster suddenly roared. The loud sound seemed to resound through the entire world, causing people's eardrums to hurt. The youth couldn't help but cover his ears. Then, he saw the red disaster spit out a huge pillar of fire into the sky, dyeing half the sky red. The great fear crushed the youth's last shred of rationality. The youth took 2 steps back and fell to the ground. The power to destroy the heavens and the earth. How could the humans win against such an enemy? Not good. I'll die. The youth only had these 2 thoughts in his mind, but he didn't even have the courage to run. The red disaster flew towards the humans. It wasn't hard to imagine what it wanted to do. If that beam of fire that lit up the sky had been shot down towards the human camp, that would be the worst disaster in the history of the human race. The red disaster easily flew past the mobile city. Although the mobile city was powerful, it couldn't stop the red disaster if it didn't want to fight it. The red disaster flew above the human camp. It was going to spit fire. It's over. No one can stop it. The youth looked at the red disaster's figure and his heart was filled with despair. The huge pillar of fire was already pouring down on the humans. A disaster was about to happen, and it was irreversible. Clang! Just as everyone fell into despair, the clear sound of a sword suddenly resounded through the world. This sword sound was so ear-piercing that everyone's thoughts of despair couldn't help but stop. A monstrous holy light suddenly lit up. The flames that the red disaster spat out instantly dissipated. It was like a thin layer of snow that shouldn't exist on a summer day. A golden-haired figure wearing white armor stood in front of the red disaster. Her sword was pointed at the red disaster, and she didn't retreat a single step. The youth's eyes suddenly lit up. It was as if he saw a peerless hero unsheath her sword. She swung her sword at the despair that was as deep as the night. A long hole was cut in the night, and a dazzling light shone down from it. The youth seemed to recognize that hero. That was the legendary Holy Maiden of Light. He had seen her a few times when she was treating His Majesty the Golden King. The Holy Maiden of Light was too easy to recognize. At such a distance, the youth was sure that it was her just by looking at her back. Red disaster, you've killed countless humans. Today is the day you die. The Holy Maiden of Light's voice was pleasant and dignified. It was like an oracle that clearly reached everyone's ears. Was this a true hero? Even against the red disaster, she wasn't at a disadvantage at all. Oh, I was wondering who it was. Isn't this the princess of the Simi Empire? You were caught by me back then. I was careless and let you escape. What, are you here to die today? Hearing the Red Disaster say this, the youth recalled that the Holy Maiden of Light had been caught by the Red Disaster before. It was all thanks to the heavens, but in that case, the Holy Maiden couldn't defeat the Red Disaster. Was she going to sacrifice herself for the humans? The youth was instantly anxious. Humph. Red Disaster, I'm no longer the same as before. Look at what this is. The Holy Maiden of Light seemed to have a plan in mind. She held the sword in her hand forward as if she wanted the Red Disaster to see it more clearly. Hearing the Holy Maiden of Light's confidence, the youth felt much more at ease. Ah! This is the legendary Holy Sword. In the youth's eyes, the Red Disaster suddenly panicked. It was no longer as majestic as before. It seemed to be filled with fear of the Holy Sword. The youth heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that the humans could be saved. Throughout the history of the human race, there had never been such a powerful sword. Just holding it in one's hand would cause thousands of streaks of light to appear. Was this the legendary Holy Sword that could slay evil dragons? Amazing! That's right. This is the Holy Sword that the God of Light personally bestowed upon you. In front of this sword, all your attacks are futile. When this sword pierces your body, you will completely dissipate. Oh! The youth was very excited. As expected of a sword that specialized in slaying evil dragons. Humph! Come and try it. The Red Disaster suddenly roared and spat out scorching flames at the saintess with frightening might. However, the Holy Maiden merely held the Holy Sword in front of her and caused the flames to disappear. I told you, it's useless. The moment I appeared in front of you with this sword, your fate was already sealed. The youth felt his blood boil and couldn't help but cheer loudly. He wasn't the only one. Countless others felt the same way. The cheers of the humans gathered together and soared into the sky like a tidal wave. The dawn of the human race was right in front of them. She would illuminate the world. Then try this. The Red Disaster raised its right fist and swung it at the Holy Maiden. It still wanted to struggle to its death. The Holy Maiden didn't move at all. She continued to use the small Holy Sword to block the Red Disaster's mountainous fist. A miraculous scene occurred. The seemingly limitless dragon fist suddenly lost all its power the moment it collided with the Holy Sword. It couldn't sink any further. The limitless power disappeared like a clay ox sinking into the sea. Damn it! A look of fear appeared in the Red Disaster's eyes. Immediately after, it began to flee. It flew into the sky. A pair of wings of light appeared behind the Holy Maiden's back as she chased after it. The Red Disaster resisted with all its might in the sky. It used many killer moves, but they were all easily neutralized by the Holy Maiden. Finally, the Holy Maiden stabbed her Holy Sword into the Red Disaster's chest amidst a despairing dragon roar. The Holy Maiden stepped on the Red Disaster's broken body and descended from the sky. With a loud boom, the ground shook. The Holy Maiden stood on top of the Megalosaurus corpse with her Holy Sword in hand. She appeared holy and dignified like a god. The Holy Maiden's gaze swept across the countless humans. Everyone looked at her in awe. Nobody said anything. Everything was silent. Then, just as the Holy Maiden of Light had said, the Red Disaster's corpse slowly turned into red light spots and dissipated. When the Red Disaster's body completely disappeared, the Holy Sword fell to the ground with a clang. This seemed to be the first sound the Red Disaster made after its death. The Holy Maiden bent down and picked up the Holy Sword. She looked at everyone and raised her hand. She raised the Holy Sword high above her head. She shouted, "We won! We won! We won! We won! We won!" Everyone began to cheer. They hugged and high-fived each other. The youth stood at the back of the crowd. He looked at the Holy Maiden's radiant figure with tears in his eyes. The Holy Maiden held her Holy Sword and led countless human warriors. After going through trials and tribulations and narrowly escaping death, she finally slew the Fire Dragon King, the Red Disaster, on its throne. Holy Calendar. Chapter 364. Red Dragon Palace. Jilin lay on the golden mountain that he was so proud of and looked ahead with a smile. In front of him was a huge mirror made of rippling water, surrounded by raging flames. Mirror of Fire. It could show everything within Jilin's range of perception in this mirror. This was a useless skill for Jilin, so he had never used it before. Since he had already perceived it, there was no need to show it in front of him. But this time was different. After all, this was his first performance in his dragon life. It was worth watching repeatedly. The images on the mirror kept flashing. It was the scene of the Holy Maiden of Light killing the Red Disaster. What a great show! It was for all the people in the world to see. Jilin watched it over and over again, watching his vivid performance. From time to time, he would let out a hee-hee-hee laugh, which made Bane's back feel cold. Seeing the humans being happy and sad because of his performance, Jilin easily gained a great sense of satisfaction. Look, how's my acting? Jilin finally couldn't hold it in and began to show off to the people around him. Bane and Sing looked at each other and didn't say anything. Maybe not, they didn't have the guts. Maybe not, after all, they still had a conscience. Jilin saw that no one was paying attention to him and directly called out, "Bane, tell me. This. That." Cold sweat dripped down Bane's forehead. "Do you still need to say this?" It was flawless and brilliant. Bane quickly threw his conscience aside. Sing suddenly turned to look at Bane and blinked his eyes that were bigger than copper bells. He thought to himself that humans were indeed the overlords of the continent. There were some things that the orcs couldn't compare to. Jilin nodded in satisfaction. He thought so too. Bane let out a long sigh of relief. He thought to himself that Jilin was still so innocent in certain aspects. But we might not be able to fool someone like Sir Sword Saint. Bane thought about it and said, Crimson Len's acting skills really couldn't be described as good. His biggest flaw was that he was too exaggerated. Normal people wouldn't be so bad. After all, they would never have dreamed that Red Calamity would actually lie to them. But humans like Sword Saint, who had interacted with Jilin before, would definitely be able to tell at a glance. Jilin's eyes were full of pride. It's okay. It's enough to fool most people. Humans will only believe what they want to believe, no matter what the truth. Bane was stunned. He wondered why this guy would suddenly say something so philosophical. All right. Jilin put away the fire mirror and said, Staya won't be back anytime soon. You traitor, go back to your room and stay there. Ben shuddered and turned around to run. This guy, after holding it in for so long, he finally can't hold it in anymore? I'm the only one in a few hundred miles. Thinking of this, Bane ran even faster. Beast King, why are you doing this? Seeing that Bane had run far away, Sing sighed and said to Jilin, Why are you doing this to yourself? Do you think I care about what ants think of me? Jilin said. Even so, Jilin interrupted Sing. Let me ask you. Do you know how many humans there are? Sing did not know. No one knew. Humans. Staya is right. There's no end to killing humans. Jilin was silent for a while, then said as if he had given up. This might be the first time he admitted that there were things in this world that he could not do. The orcs are willing to give it a try to solve the Beast King's problem. Sing said in a low voice. Jilin closed his eyes and shook his head. You haven't been to the human capital. The density of the humans there is beyond your imagination. Also, humans have their uses. If we really kill all of them, it might be a loss to the orcs. What loss? Races other than humans don't know how to produce. Humans already have a complete currency system, but most of you are still bartering. Jilin knocked his head, feeling a headache. Sing did not understand what the Beast King meant. What productivity, what currency, but it's okay. From now on, the orcs, dwarves, sea clans, and all living things in the world will be on equal footing with humans. Jilin's eyes suddenly became cunning. Is the Nanshin Empire ready? Singh suddenly looked up, his eyes filled with excitement. We're just waiting for your order. Now that the War King, King of Fighters, Muzin is dead, the people of the Nanshin Empire will be in chaos. Using this opportunity, the orcs will definitely take over the Nanshin Empire. Jilin nodded. Has the equipment that was sent to the wasteland been distributed? It's already been equipped. Good. While there are still many people from the Nanshin Empire here, let's hurry up and make our move. Jilin smiled evilly. In human terms, this is called taking advantage of the situation. The Beast King is wise. Singh said sincerely. From now on, 4 of the 5 great human empires will fall into our hands. The Divine Dragon Empire will belong to the Red Dragon sect. The Nanshin Empire will be taken over by the orcs. The 3rd Prince of the Middle Empire will not be a problem. As for the Saimai Empire, they will worship Staya as a god from now on. But the reason was actually a lie that she made with me. Ha ha, Staya never lies. Who knew that her first lie would deceive the world, ha ha. Now, the only human empire that is not affected by me is the Snow Wind Empire. It's not a big deal that a lone tree can't support itself. The world has finally become a little more comfortable. Jilin let out a long sigh, as if he had finally completed a great wish that he had had for many years. When he saw that many races were being bullied by humans, he was angry and wanted to take half of the world for the other races. Now, it was about time. Go, the Nanshin Empire must be taken down, and quickly. Only then can our territories be connected, understand? Jilin said. Yes, Beast King. Singh shouted and left. He wanted to take away all the orcs in the volcano. Although the orcs here were only a small portion compared to the orcs in the wasteland, they were all orc elites. They would be the backbone of the future battlefield. Singh's eyes flashed with excitement. That was his yearning and expectation for the great era that was about to come. A great empire was about to be born. The empire's territory included the Endless Sea, the Red Dragon Empire, the Nanshin Empire, the Wasteland, and the Gerda Volcano Range. The size of the territory was unprecedented. In this empire, all living things were equal and accepted all races in the world, including humans. All races could live a stable life here. They could eat well and wear warm clothes. They could work together and coexist in harmony. They didn't have to worry about new lives starving or freezing to death. Humans didn't have to fear the orcs, and the orcs wouldn't bare their fangs at humans. It was like a kingdom in a dream. The Beast King said that when the empire was established, it would be called All Spirits. The Empire of All Spirits. Chapter 365. Jilin counted with his fingers and suddenly realized that he didn't have much work to do. The various races of the world had already stood up, and humans could no longer stand on the heads of other races. Jilin was infuriated when he saw that look of his as if the heavens were the boss and he was number 2. They were clearly a group of ants, how could they be so arrogant? And now that he was considered dead in the eyes of humans, the conflict between him and humans would naturally disappear, saving him a lot of trouble. The dragon bone of the Water Dragon King was in his hands, so he should send it back to the Dragon Tomb as soon as possible. However, there was no use in being anxious about this matter, he couldn't leave this world yet. Then, the only thing left was Aisha. The clue of the human dragon's son was in her hands. But the woman mentioned by the Water Dragon King, to be honest, he had no clue. Even if he caught her now, it would be useless. Jilin had used his golden pupils to observe her over and over again, and he had almost seen through her. If there was any secret in her body, it should have been discovered by him long ago. Jilin suddenly raised his head, the golden light in his eyes shone brightly. He looked to the east. At the same time, the Elf Queen stood on the shore of the Elf Island. The waves were calm, but there was a storm in her eyes. I was schemed against. The Elf Queen's narrow eyes flashed with anger. Somewhere in the Snow Wind Empire, there was a black intermediate town standing in the snow. A town like this was common in the Snow Wind Empire, and there were many of them. Perhaps even the Iron Blood King didn't know how many there were. A black light appeared in the sky above the city, followed by black clouds rolling like waves. Try to hide in the snow, no one can see you. Near the center of the city, there was an inn. Aisha was standing in one of the rooms. The layout of the room was very simple. There was a narrow window and a bed with a curtain. In the middle of the room, there was a table and 2 chairs. There was a cabinet by the wall. On the table, the dark scripture was spread out flat. It was opened, revealing the last page. That was Aisha's pursuit from the beginning to the end. This world was not big for beings like the Elf Queen and Jilin. Just like how a village with a few hundred households was only so big to humans. Although it was not to say that he could immediately detect the slightest movement of the grass in the wind. But if something big happened, no one would be able to hide it. From Jilin's point of view, there were only 2.5 residents in this village called the world. He and the Fairy Queen. The third prince, after becoming the human emperor, could barely be considered half a human emperor. But now, it seemed like someone was going to pay him a visit. Furthermore, that person's aura was not good. It was cold, dark, and evil. He seemed to be far stronger than himself. However, such a powerful being shouldn't be able to enter this place. Jilin narrowed his eyes and decided to take a look. This was because he sensed a familiar feeling from that distant aura. It seemed that Bane and Staya's plan was useless. Jilin transformed into his human form and arrived behind Bane in just a few steps. Before Bane could turn around, he felt as if he was riding on clouds. When his eyes could see clearly again, he suddenly appeared in the sky. The thick clouds under his feet made it impossible for him to see the ground. What is this? Bane's voice trembled, thinking that Jilin was going to throw him down. Was this how the dragons punish traitors? Bane blinked, he realized that something must have happened. This was not how the dragons killed traitors, because all dragons had wings, it was meaningless to throw them down from the sky. And if Jilin wanted to kill him, why would he need to do it himself? Aisha is out, let's go. Jilin said as he stretched out his wings and flew quickly in the direction he sensed. There was a gap in this world. There was another high-speed movement where he could not see the surrounding scenery clearly. The strong wind pressure made Ben swallow all the words he wanted to say back into his stomach. The Fairy Queen turned her head and looked in the direction of Jilin, her eyes flashing with a complicated look. It seemed that even though they were separated by countless distances, she could still see Jilin's figure clearly. In fact, she could not see, she could only roughly sense Jilin's position. In her eyes, Jilin was equally striking in this world. It was like the only huge bonfire burning in the dark mountain village at night. Damn it! The Fairy Queen said softly. Along with her voice, there were 2 sudden claps of thunder in the sky. On the Fairy Island, the Fairy Queen's words were law. Not long after, Jilin threw Bane on the ground. A bone-piercing chill suddenly came from below and went straight to the top of his head. Bane shivered and quickly jumped up from the ground. He hugged his chest with both hands and rubbed his arms, trying his best to shrink himself into a ball. But even so, Bane still did not feel a trace of warmth. He looked around, the snow under his feet was up to his calves, and the skin on his legs hurt like needles. The wind and snow were fierce, and his clothes were thin. Bane was a little dazed until a hand was placed on his back, and warmth spread all over his body. Phew! Bane let out a long sigh. If Jilin did not help, he might have fainted from the cold. Why don't you turn into a dragon when you fly? Bane's first question was actually this. It won't be easy to be discovered, Jilin said. Do you care? Bane was puzzled. Now that I've been killed by Staya, I can't expose her, Jilin said. What are you doing here? Bane finally asked a question that a normal person would ask. Aisha is here. Jilin signaled Bane to look forward. Bane followed Jilin's line of sight and suddenly froze. An ordinary city appeared in front of him. There was nothing to see, but a black barrier visible to the naked eye covered the sky above the city. It was as if someone had used a black glass bowl to cover the entire city. "What is Aisha doing?" Bane asked hurriedly. Being trapped in such a thing by Aisha, one could imagine the situation of the person inside. It would not be good. "You'll know later," Jilin said. "You're right. Let's ask her face to face." Bane nodded fiercely and rushed towards the city. Now that Jilin was behind him, he had nothing to fear. The wind and snow in the sky were the same, and so was Aisha. Bang! Bane crashed into the barrier and fell backward into the snow. Jilin facebombed. "What a foolish human, why do you think you can go through?" Jilin looked at Bane, who was lying in the snow, and asked curiously. "Ouch!" Bane groaned in pain. He felt dizzy and could not speak. Jilin shook his head, walked to the barrier, and threw a punch. With a bang, the wind and snow disappeared for a moment. But the barrier was still intact. Bane finally got up, thinking that Jilin could not break it with one punch. Jilin was also confused. He looked at his fist and took out the dragon scale sword. The barrier suddenly rippled and a line of words appeared. The first sentence of the Bible of Darkness is, Bane was stunned. What kind of method was this? Chapter 366. Jilin smiled slightly. Wasn't this the legendary fill-in-the-blank question? All things are born in darkness and will end in darkness. Jilin wrote this sentence in the blank space with his index finger. The barrier rippled, and a gap that was only big enough for one person to pass through suddenly opened. Jilin snorted proudly and walked in with his head held high. Bane nodded and thought to himself, "You are awesome." He lowered his head and was about to follow Jilin in. Bang! Jilin couldn't help but look back. Bane was once again lying upright in the snow. Bane struggled to stand up and held the barrier. He copied Jilin and wrote that sentence on the barrier. There was no movement. What's going on? Bane's eyes were blank. Well, Jilin thought for a moment. You should wait here for a while. Huh? Bane was dumbfounded. Why did you bring me here if you didn't bring me in? You want me to stand alone in the cold wind and admire the snow? Jilin ignored him and simply walked into the depths of the town. He could feel that Aisha was there. Bringing Bane here was not a useless move. At least he was a human. After experiencing so many things, Jilin realized that there were many things in this world that he couldn't see clearly from the perspective of a dragon. He needed a human. But since Aisha had set up such a formation, it meant that she didn't want others to disturb her. Aisha's attitude was unclear, and the situation was unpredictable. And the place where Aisha was always very deep. If a guy like Bane rashly tried to probe, he might drown before he could even make a splash. So it was better to test it himself first. Jilin walked forward in the town as if he was in his own yard. Occasionally, there would be 2 or 3 people lying on the side of the road. They were wearing heavy clothes, but their bodies were as cold as ice. Obviously, they had all frozen to death. However, their expressions were peaceful, as if death had suddenly arrived, and they hadn't been able to detect it. Jilin suddenly thought of a legend he had heard before. It was said that in the cold world, humans would often drink too much and walk on the streets drunk. Either they slipped, or they just wanted to sit on the ground to rest, and then they melted into the snow forever, never to stand up again. Well, Jilin admitted that this statement was a bit unreasonable. It was impossible for these people to have held a large cocktail party and then freeze to death on the way home. He didn't want to think that these people's deaths had anything to do with Aisha. He didn't care about these people's lives, but in Jilin's eyes, this way of dying was too miserable. He didn't even know who killed him or how he died. No living being could grasp or recognize their own birth, so they had to at least recognize their own death. There had to be a head or a tail. Creak, creak. Jilin stepped on the snow, leaving a footprint in his footsteps as he walked to the entrance of a hotel. Jilin raised his hand and pushed the door open. Creak, the door was unlocked. Jilin entered the hotel and saw the scene in front of him. Even he was stunned, then he sighed softly. There was a counter in the lobby of the hotel, and there were 5 or 6 long tables in the hall. 4 of the tables had people lying on their stomachs, probably merchants or adventurers. Half-eaten food was on the table. There were also 2 young girls in messenger clothes lying on the ground. Jilin couldn't help but click his tongue. Fortunately, it was cold outside. In addition, the fire in the room had already been extinguished, so these corpses didn't rot and stink. Jilin glanced at them and didn't look anymore. He walked to a staircase and walked up to the door of the innermost room. Jilin stopped. Jilin thought for a moment. Knock, knock, knock. The door is unlocked, please come in. A woman's voice came from the door. Jilin opened the door and saw the woman in a black robe who seemed to be wrapped in countless secrets. Long time no see, Jilin said. Ha! Aisha sneered. I haven't been by your side for more than a year. How did you become so human? Oh? Jilin raised his eyebrows. You knocked before entering. Do you really think you're a human visiting relatives and friends? But you still answered, didn't you? I was cooperating with you. And for you and me, is more than a year considered a long time? Jilin thought about it seriously and felt that Aisha's words made some sense. Why are you in a room full of dead people? Don't you feel awkward? I didn't expect you to care about this. Aisha was a little surprised. She hadn't seen Jilin for more than a year, but she didn't seem to recognize this dragon. Jilin was also stunned. Only then did he realize that since the dwarves came to the Red Dragon Palace, he had indeed been more particular than before. Sit. Aisha pointed to the stool opposite her table. Jilin nodded, closed the door, and walked to sit opposite Aisha. Why did you build a barrier to cover the city? Naturally, I didn't want to be disturbed. Why did you let me in? Because I couldn't stop you. Bane is still outside. Then let him stay outside. So? Jilin paused. Everyone in this city is dead? You care? Aisha's eyes narrowed. Her eyes seemed to say, why are you, a dragon who has killed countless people, pretending to be compassionate, have you become a vegetarian? I don't care. Jilin said, I'm just curious. You sealed off the city so that no one can enter or leave, and then you killed everyone in the city. I want to know your purpose in doing this, or rather, what are you doing? Aisha was silent for a long time. Hesitation rarely appeared on her face. This. Aisha finally pointed to the dark scripture on the table and said. Although Jilin was still inexperienced in her eyes, Aisha knew that dragons, with their high intelligence, were not so easily deceived. What is this? Jilin asked. This has always been my purpose. A ritual, a magic, an omnipotent knowledge, the ultimate. Witches have many names for it. But in the end, this is just a mission, a summoning ritual. Mission? The God of Darkness's personal mission is to use this summoning ritual to summon a shadow of him in this world. All witches take this as their life's work. Why? Because the God of Darkness will fulfill the summoner's wish. Oh, cliché. This time it was Jilin's turn to be disdainful. Because the God of Darkness is an ancient existence. Aisha did not care. So, have you thought about this wish? Jilin looked directly at Aisha. He also wanted to know what this woman was trying to achieve. Naturally. What is it? Take a guess. Destroy the Temple of Light? I'm more than 200 years old. The grudges of the world have long been indifferent. I think you're a vengeful person. Rule the world? Isn't that too vulgar? Restore the glory of the witches? What does that have to do with me? I'm not guessing. It's immortality, You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.